हेलो फ्रेंड्स, वेलकम बैक टू माय चैनल। तो इस नावल का मैं सेकंड पार्ट लेके आ चुका हूँ, जो चैप्टर 32 से चैप्टर 44 तक रहेगा। तो बिना कुछ देरी किए स्टार्ट करते हैं।
Chapter 31, Resentment Awakens, Soul Devouring by Void Flame. At the instant the soul power storm erupted, time seemed to stretch and freeze. The ink black swarming through water was no longer silent, dead water, it transformed into a roaring, furious dragon, rushing skyward while carrying an extreme, soul-freezing chill. The massive skeleton of the ancient flood dragon's remnant was no longer a cold, inanimate object, every bone was humming and trembling. Deep blue patterns erupted with blinding light, as if a giant beast that had slept for eons was being forcibly awakened, emitting a silent, painful roar. The chaotic flow of soul power, intertwined with pale white and deep blue, acted like billions of cold bone-scraping blades, crazily cutting and eroding everything in the space. Roar. Yulan, bearing the brunt, let out a shrill, sorrowful cry. Its massive body was violently flung away by the soul power storm, crashing heavily against the cave wall. Large swaths of deep blue scales peeled off, and fresh blood sprayed wildly. This was not merely a physical impact, it was a terrifying suppression and erosion originating from the source of its bloodline. The resentment and madness belonging to the Scale Lord, contained within that soul power storm caused far greater harm to it, a descendant linked by blood, than to outsiders. It curled up in a corner, its aura rapidly withering, its vertical pupils filled with pain and fear stemming from the depths of its soul. Xiao Yixian was further away, but her great purple poison barrier was as fragile as paper in front of the soul power storm, shattering instantly. The bone-chilling soul power, mixed with mad resentment, struck her body and soul directly. She groaned, her face turning paper white, and blood seeped from her 7 orifices simultaneously. The poison power within her body, which had been tempered into a slightly peaceful state by the swarming true water, was like oil dumped into a pot with a giant stone, instantly erupting again. Moreover, this time, the eruption was mixed with negative emotions brought by the soul power: resentment, despair, unwillingness, violence, madness. These emotions acted like poison, resonating with the insidious nature of her own poison power, causing her mind to waver and hallucinations to fill her vision. Guard your mind, circulate the poison scripture. Lin Yan's sharp shout exploded like thunder on the edge of Xiao Yixian's consciousness being swallowed by resentment. He was not having an easy time either, it felt as if his soul was being pierced by countless eyeballs, his head splitting with pain. But having been baptized by the will of the earth vein, his soul was naturally resilient, and with the seed flame of void devouring flame guarding his core, he could barely maintain clarity. He stared fixedly at the purifying erosion fire seed in his hand, which had cracked patterns, flickered with light, and pulsed like a pail, beating hard. It was this thing, it was not a simple inheritance token or key, but a soul bomb that sealed the strongest resentment and unwillingness from the moment the ancient Scale Lord fell. The ancient soul scale was an identity token, while this fire seed was likely a revenge seed, left by that existence to exact revenge or execute some extreme contingency. When it came into contact with the soul power imprint of the remnant of the same origin, it immediately triggered a chain reaction. System: analyze the core of the current soul power storm in the state of the purifying erosion fire seed. Find a suppression or guidance plan. Lin Yan shouted in his mind, while forcibly urging his almost frozen Doqi to deploy a thin shield in front of him, fused with the aura of the green lotus core flame and the fallen heart flame, to resist the most direct soul power impact. But this shield was swaying in the storm, in imminent danger. Warning: a super high-intensity composite soul power storm has formed. The core is a collection of residual resentment after the fall of a top-tier powerhouse of the ancient Hun clan, ancestor of 10,000 scales, fused with part of the remnant soul of the ancient flood dragon's remnant and the extreme yin power of the swarming true water. Possesses strong soul erosion, consciousness pollution, and energy freezing characteristics. Purifying erosion fire seed seal damage. The source of the purifying soul flame, sealed inside, is resonating with the resentment core and is releasing uncontrollably, exacerbating the storm. The structure of the fire seed itself is extremely unstable and may collapse completely at any time, triggering a wider range of soul annihilation explosions. Emergency plan deduction: searching for available countermeasures for the host. Plan 1. Use the seed flame of void devouring flame to fully devour the resentment soul power at the core of the storm. Advantage: void swallowing flame has strong restraint and devouring properties against soul power and negative energy. Disadvantage: the total amount of resentment soul power is massive and its essence is extremely high. Although the host's seed flame is strengthened, it is still insufficient to swallow it completely. Forcing it may lead to the seed flame overloading and backfiring on the host's soul. Success rate: about 30%. Risk: extremely high. Plan 2. Use the ancient soul scale as a medium to attempt to communicate with and appease the relatively peaceful inheritance soul power in the remnant, countering the resentment soul power. Advantage: same origin, may produce guidance or differentiation effects. Disadvantage: resentment soul power occupies absolute dominance, the success rate of appeasement is low, and it may invite disaster. Success rate: less than 10%. Plan 3. Detonate a portion of the swarming true water essence to forcibly freeze and purify part of the resentment soul power with its extreme yin and purifying power, creating an escape window. Advantage: can instantly create chaos and buy time. Disadvantage: consumes precious resources and may intensify energy conflicts, leading to unpredictable consequences. Success rate: about 40%. 3 plans, each more risky than the last, and none with a high success rate. But there was no time to hesitate. The storm was expanding rapidly, Xiao Yixian was almost unable to hold on, Yulan was dying, and the cave was shaking violently, ready to collapse completely at any moment. Gambling on it, Plan 1 is the main, Plan 3 is backup. Lin Yan's eyes turned sharp. The void swallowing flame was his strongest trump card and the only thing that could possibly eat this resentment soul power. He no longer suppressed the desire of the pitch black flame within his body. With a thought, the strengthened seed flame of void devouring flame, like a fierce beast breaking free from its shackles, surged wildly from his palm. It was no longer a tiny flame but transformed into a stream of ink black fire that seemed capable of devouring light, actively meeting the soul power storm intertwined with pale white and deep blue that was sweeping over. The devouring began. The moment the pitch black flame touched the soul power storm, there was no explosion, no loud noise, only a hair-raising sound of dissolution. Wherever the void swallowing flame passed, the violent resentment soul power was like snow meeting boiling oil, rapidly decomposed, devoured, and turned into the purest soul power essence, merging into the pitch black flame. The pitch black flame became more solid and profound at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the sense of emptiness and devouring it emitted became increasingly terrifying. It worked. But as the system predicted, the total amount of resentment soul power was too massive, and its essence was too high. The speed at which the seed flame of void devouring flame devoured it could not keep up with the speed at which the storm swept and regenerated. Moreover, the negative emotions contained in the resentment, madness, violence, unwillingness began to counterattack Lin Yan's soul during the devouring process. Countless broken, chaotic, despair-filled, and murderous fragments of images forcibly flooded into his mind, the collapse of a giant shadow covering the sky, blood-stained scales falling like rain, the grim laughter of traitors, unwilling roars. Lin Yan hugged his head and roared, his whites instantly bloodshot, blood spilling from the corners of his mouth. It felt as if his soul was being torn by countless hands, the negative emotions were almost drowning him. The seed flame of void devouring flame also became somewhat restless and unstable, and the devouring efficiency began to decline. Lin Yan, Xiao Yixian, seeing Lin Yan's pain, endured the dual pain of her own soul erosion and poison power eruption and urged the poison power she had just refined a trace of Xuanming true water into, which carried a hint of calm characteristics. It transformed into several grey-blue fused with poison power and true water characteristics, silk threads, winding toward Lin Yan's body, trying to help him share and purify some of the invading negative soul power. But this was just a drop in the bucket. Master, use the scale, approach the remnant, broken horn. Just then, Yulan's weak but clear spiritual fluctuation came through. It struggled to lift its massive head, looking at a small, complex rune mark intertwined with deep blue and pale white that was flashing violently at the broken horn of the ancient flood dragon's remnant's head. That place is where the ancestor received the initial blessing from the scale lord, and also the key node that seals the core resentment, the scale, resonance. Hearing this, Lin Yan suddenly looked at the ancient soul scales in his hand. That's right, the ancient soul scale was a scale lord token, and the mark on the broken horn of the remnant was where the blessing and seal were. Using the ancient soul scale of the same origin to contact the node might produce unexpected changes. Enduring the soul-tearing pain, he used his right hand to control the void-swallowing flame to continue devouring and resisting the frontal storm, while his left hand grabbed an ancient soul scale, infused his remaining doqi and a trace of void-swallowing flame aura into it, and with all his strength, threw it fiercely toward the rune mark at the broken horn of the remnant. The ancient soul scale turned into a streak of black light, accurately hitting the flickering rune. The expected explosion did not happen. The ancient soul scale, like a drop of water merging into the ocean, silently stuck to the rune. The next moment, the entire head of the remnant shook violently. The pale and deep blue light that was flashing violently and full of resentment suddenly froze for an instant. Immediately after, the dark gold patterns on the ancient soul scale and the deep blue patterns on the remnant's bones lit up and resonated at an unprecedentedly harmonious frequency. A relatively peaceful, ancient soul power fluctuation, carrying faint sadness and attachment, was awakened from the depths of the remnant, like a trickling stream, beginning to counter and dilute the violent resentment soul power. Although this peaceful soul power was far less powerful than the resentment soul power, the moment it appeared, the unity of the entire soul power storm was broken. It was like a diversion appearing in a raging flood. The pressure on the seed flame of void devouring flame dropped sharply, and the devouring efficiency skyrocketed. The pitch black flame shone brightly, devouring the divided resentment soul power even more crazily. At the same time, the ancient soul scale stuck to the rune seemed to become a temporary stabilizer and filter. A portion of relatively pure soul power and information fragments, containing no crazy resentment, began to feed back into Lin Yan's mind through the ancient soul scale. These messages were more fragmented but lacked those maddening negative emotions. 9 keys, gate of return to ruins, scattered in all directions, gather them all, can summon, return, or end. Quote. Traitor, inside the Hun clan, black mist, devouring the same clan, achieving oneself. Quote. My scales, fire, water, wind, thunder, earth, light, dark, poison, space, time, 9 scales 9 keys. Quote. Latecomer, if you get my scale, be cautious, afraid it is a trap. The information was fragmented, but it caused Lin Yan's mind to shake violently. 9 keys, gate of return to ruins, a traitor within the Hun clan, 9 attribute scales keys. This game of chess was bigger and more complex than he imagined. The fall of that ancestor of 10,000 scales seemed to involve internal strife within the Hun clan, and the contingency he left behind, including this purifying erosion fire seed and possible other keys, was not only a tool for revenge but might itself be a huge trap for latecomers. Just as Lin Yan was digesting this astonishing information, and the void-swallowing flame was taking the opportunity to devour wantonly, and the storm was gradually showing signs of being controlled. Crack! A clear cracking sound rang out. The purifying erosion fire seed in Lin Yan's hand had its surface crack suddenly expand, spreading to the entire crystal. The pale, purifying soul flame inside suddenly shrank and then erupted violently. It was not an explosion, but transformed into a pale, extremely condensed beam of soul power, ignoring the void-swallowing flame that was devouring in the soul power storm that was coming down. It seemed to possess its own will, instantly penetrating space, and struck Lin Yan's glabella fiercely. Lin Yan, Xiao Yixian let out a heart-wrenching exclamation. Lin Yan only felt the soul power that was cold to the extreme, yet carried a strange burning sensation, like the sharpest ice all, piercing deep into the depths of his soul. An ancient consciousness, full of endless resentment, madness, but also a trace of strange relief, exploded in his soul. Latecomer, inherit my purifying erosion, accept my karma, find all 9 keys, open the return to ruins, at that time, you will know everything, or become the firewood for my return. Ha ha ha. The consciousness dissipated, but the pale soul power, like a maggot on the tarsal bone, was deeply branded on the origin of Lin Yan's soul. Together with a heart-burning seal, on the left and right, they formed 2 distinct but equally dangerous marks. At the same time, a massive and pure, yet abnormally cold soul power origin poured into Lin Yan's soul along with this consciousness, causing his soul power to skyrocket instantly, but also bringing bursts of cold pain and a heavy burden. The purifying erosion fire seed had completely disappeared. Or rather, it had chosen Lin Yan as a new carrier and executor or sacrificed in this way. The soul power storm lost most of its power because one of its cores, the purifying soul flame, had transferred. Under the devouring of the void-swallowing flame and the appeasement of the peaceful soul power guided by the ancient soul scale, it rapidly weakened and dissipated. The Xuanming true water pool gradually returned to calm, and the light of the ancient flood dragon's remnant also dimmed, as if it had exhausted its last strength. The cave was a mess, but the crisis seemed temporarily resolved. Lin Yan staggered back a few steps and was supported by Xiao Yixian. His face was pale, and at his glabella, a pale flame pattern flickered, emitting a cold soul power fluctuation. He felt that his soul power had indeed become much stronger, but his control over soul power had become unusually awkward, and there was a lingering coldness and heaviness, as if his soul was burdened with an iceberg. Xiao Yixian looked at the mark on his glabella with worry, and then looked at the ancient soul scale in her own hand. She had also taken one before that had become scalding hot and was vibrating slightly. Yulan struggled to lift its head, and the look in its eyes as it gazed at Lin Yan was filled with even more complex awe and a trace of undisguised fear. The cave's shaking stopped, but Lin Yan knew that the real trouble had just begun. He had gained powerful soul power but also accepted a terrifying karma. The secret of the 9 keys return to ruins, the possibility of the Scale Lord's return, and the shadows within the Hun clan were like invisible shackles placed upon him. And this new, cold, pure corrosion soul seal, on his labella, facing the hot, heart-burning seal, on his back, seemed to indicate that he had been swept into the center of a huge vortex of 2 different airs and 2 different existences and could no longer escape. Chapter 32, Soul Seal imprinted, where does the path lead? The soul power storm completely subsided, leaving only devastation in its wake. Inside the cave, shattered stalactites were scattered everywhere, and the rock walls were covered in cracks. The pitch-black pool of swimming true water had ceased boiling, yet it seemed a layer shallower than before, its color slightly dimmed. The ancient flood dragon's remnant remained quietly coiled in the pool, the light on its bones having completely faded, returning to a deathly stillness. Only the rune mark where the horn had broken off had vanished, replaced by a pitch-black scale origin ancient soul scale tightly embedded in the bone, like a silent tombstone, recounting ancient grievances and legacies. In the deathly silence, only heavy, exhausted breathing could be heard. Lin Yan leaned against a relatively intact rock, his face as pale as paper. The pale flame pattern between his brows was clearly visible, emitting a faint, cold light, like a third, icy eye. He sat with his eyes closed, brows tightly furrowed, desperately trying to adapt to the sudden, drastic change within his soul. Vast, that was the most direct sensation he had regarding his soul power at this moment. Having devoured a large amount of pure resentful soul power though filtered and converted by the void swallowing flame and the final forced infusion of the purifying soul flame origin, his total soul power had surged, crossing directly from the mid-stage of the mortal realm to the peak, even touching the threshold of the spirit realm. This speed of improvement, if spread, would be enough to drive any alchemist or soul cultivator insane. However, the price was equally heavy. First was the omnipresent coldness and heaviness. The pure corrosion soul seal was like an inextinguishable source of ice, continuously emitting chilly soul power fluctuations, eroding and reshaping the essence of his soul, making his thinking occasionally become abnormally calm, even cold. At the same time, his soul carried a total amount of soul power far exceeding his current realm. It was like a child wielding a giant hammer, making it extremely difficult to control. Every time he mobilized his soul power, it felt sluggish and heavy, accompanied by faint, stinging pain. Secondly, there was the causality and information left behind by that cold will. The 9 keys corresponding to 9 types of ancient soul scales, the gate of return to ruins, the infighting of the Hun clan, the possibility of the Scale Lord returning. These fragments of information swirled in his mind like a nightmare. He felt as if he had inadvertently stepped into a giant web spanning eons, becoming a pawn in some ancient entity's plan for revenge or return, or perhaps even spare firewood. System, perform a comprehensive scan of my soul state and analyze the essence, impact, and controllability of the pure corrosion soul seal. Lin Yan thought silently to himself. Scanning. Soul state. Total volume has reached the peak of the mortal realm, undergoing qualitative change, stability is low to medium. 2 external marks exist. 1. Heart-burning seal, magma earth walking dragon, fire attribute tracking, curse mark, energy level medium, partially suppressed. 2. Pure corrosion soul seal, ancient Hun clan, ancestor of 10,000 scales, composite soul power brand, containing a portion of pure soul power origin, purifying soul flame, law fragments, and a piece of causality contract information. Energy level, extremely high. Current status, semi-activated. Impact analysis. Positive, provides continuous soul power nourishment, accelerates soul realm improvement, grants a certain resistance and understanding of pure corrosion, type purification, soul power erosion energy, contains partial high-level soul power application techniques requires analysis. Negative, continuous cold soul power erosion, may lead to personality shifts tending towards calm cold, increased soul burden, decreased control, causality contract, as unknown, may trigger mandatory tasks or become a summoning sacrifice coordinate under specific conditions in the future. Controllability suggestion, use the void swallowing flame subflame as the core to construct a soul defense system, gradually devouring and converting the cold soul power and negative contract parts of the seal. This process requires a large amount of time and soul power, and carries the risk of triggering a backlash from the seal. Current controllability, less than 30%. It was indeed extremely troublesome, but at least, the void swallowing flame had a restraining effect on it, which could be considered a glimmer of hope. Lin Yan slowly opened his eyes, a faint, pale cold flame seemingly flashing in his pupils before quickly fading away. Lin Yan, are you alright? Xiao Yixian's concerned voice came. She had barely managed to suppress the poison power riot in her body that had reignited due to the impact of the resentment. Her complexion was still not great, but the worry in her eyes was very genuine. She walked to Lin Yan's side, her gaze falling on the cold flame pattern between his brows, and couldn't help but reach out. Her fingertips condensed a wisp of grey-blue poison power fused with the characteristics of the swimming true water, and she gently touched it. Hiss. Upon contact, the soul seal on Lin Yan's brow grew slightly hot, and the poison power on Xiao Yixian's fingertips recoiled as if electrocuted. Her expression changed slightly, so cold, and there's a feeling of strong rejection. Her poison power was inherently sinister, but it was completely different from the cold purity of this soul seal, even conflicting with it. I'm fine, it's temporarily suppressed. Lin Yan shook his head and looked at Xiao Yixian. How are you feeling? The poison power seems to have become a bit purer, and it's actually easier to control. Maybe it's because it was scared by that resentful soul power and forced to become more condensed. Xiao Yixian cracked a joke with a bitter smile, then straightened her expression, but my soul has suffered some damage and needs time to rest. Also, this ancient soul scale in my hand. She opened her hand. The pitch-black scale was currently slightly heating up, and the dark gold patterns on it seemed to come alive, faintly pointing in a certain direction of the cave, not the exit but the deeper rock wall. It seems to be guiding something. Lin Yan looked at the remaining ancient soul scales in his storage ring and could similarly feel a faint resonance from them, pointing in different directions. It seemed that each ancient soul scale might correspond to a place of inheritance or sealing like this one, with different attributes. 9 scales, 9 locations, 9 keys. This clue was simply too vast. Moss, master, a weak mental fluctuation came. Yulan struggled to lift its massive head. It was severely injured, its scales shattered, and its aura was withered, but when those deep blue vertical pupils looked at Lin Yan, there was an indescribable complexity mixed with awe. It had witnessed Lin Yan use the ancient soul scale to calm the resentment, devour the soul power, and even inherit the pure corrosion soul seal, which further confirmed its suspicion that Lin Yan had an extraordinary relationship with the Scale Lord. Thank you, master, for calming the ancestors' resentment and saving this place. How are your injuries? Lin Yan asked. Yulan could be considered one of his own now, although it was because of the ancient soul scale and the combat power of a rank 5 magical beast could not be ignored. My origin is damaged. I need a long period of quiet rest and a large amount of water and yin attribute energy. Yulan's voice was bitter. The swimming true water here has suffered great damage to its spirituality after this incident, but the core remains, which is enough to help me recover. However, I am afraid I cannot leave with master immediately. Lin Yan nodded. Yulan was seriously injured, and taking it with him would be a burden. This place had swimming true water, which was the best place for it to heal and recover. You stay here to heal and guard this place. If there is anything important, you can contact me through the soul contract. Lin Yan instructed, while taking out a jade bottle from his storage ring, which contained the small wisp of swimming true water essence he had collected earlier. I give this to you, it may be helpful for your recovery. Gratitude appeared in Yulan's eyes. Thank you for your grace, master. Yulan will definitely recover as soon as possible to serve you. Also, it hesitated for a moment, looking at the ancient flood dragon's remnant. The ancestor's remnant has had its inheritance mark fully activated after this event. Master can use the ancient soul scale to sense and obtain the complete inheritance within at any time. The bones of the remnant are also supreme treasures for artifact refining, but, although the resentment on them has dispersed, they still retain extremely strong pressure and yin power, making them difficult to separate and collect with ordinary means. Lin Yan looked at the ancient flood dragon's remnant. A complete remnant of a rank 7 or higher magical beast was of immeasurable value. But he did not have the ability to handle it now, and forcibly separating it might trigger another incident. It was better to leave it here, guarded by Yulan, and come back to take it when his strength was sufficient. As for the inheritance, he had already obtained most of it in the torrent of information just now, and the rest could be slowly digested later. Leave the remnant for now, you look after it as well. Lin Yan made his decision. He looked at the swimming true water pool again. Although a wisp of the core essence had been taken away, the pool water itself was still a rare, extremely yin treasure. Xiao Yixian, you can collect some more true water to use for tempering your poison power in the future, but you must act within your capabilities. Xiao Yixian nodded, carefully stepped forward, and used a special cold jade container to collect about a bowl of swimming true water. This time, without the protection of the ancient soul scale's aura, she had to use her own poison power to resist the true water. The process was still painful, but with the previous experience, she could barely endure it. After handling these matters, the cave temporarily quieted down. The two of them and the flood dragon each adjusted their breathing to recover from their injuries and strength. A few hours later, Lin Yan felt the stinging pain in his soul ease slightly, and his control over the surging soul power had also barely improved a little, at least it wouldn't emit cold pressure at every turn. Xiao Yixian's complexion also became much ruddier, and her aura was more stable. Yulan dived into the swimming true water pool to heal using the water, its aura slowly recovering. It was time to consider the next step. Lin Yan spread out the map already soaked by water, but roughly legible and, combining the faint guidance of the ancient soul scale with his own memory, attempted to determine their current location. Having been carried by Kai Rong as he crashed through the depths of the lava cave, they had entered an underground dark river and drifted here, long since unaware of how far they had deviated from their original route. This place was likely deep within the northwestern region of the Magical Beast Mountain Range, perhaps even approaching some unknown perilous area. Ding, detected that the host has obtained key information. 9 keys return to ruins, triggering a long-term main quest, Secret of the Ancients. Quest content, investigate the truth behind the fall of the Ancestor of 10,000 Scales, an ancient powerhouse of the Hun clan. Collect all 9 origin ancient soul scales, and uncover the secret of the Gate of Return to Ruins. Current progress, 1/9 partial information and resonance obtained for water and yin attribute scales. Stage Quest 1. Based on the resonance guidance of the existing ancient soul scale, search for the next possible Scale Lord relic. It is recommended to prioritize areas that are compatible with the host's attributes or are relatively safe. Quest rewards. For every relic discovered, obtain corresponding points, treasures, and clues based on the exploration degree. After collecting all 9 scales, the final stage will be unlocked. Warning. This quest involves extremely high-level secrets and dangers, and may conflict with the goals of other forces such as the Hall of Souls. Ancient races, please proceed with caution. Host. The system quest was released at the right time, confirming Lin Yan's guess. This muddy water was something he had no choice but to wade through. Where are we going next? Xiao Yixian packed her things and looked at Lin Yan. She now placed absolute trust in Lin Yan, even if the road ahead seemed shrouded in mist and fraught with danger. Lin Yan stroked the slightly warm ancient soul scale in his hand, which pointed toward the northeast. This piece had the strongest resonance, and the direction was not toward the dark river they had come from. The northeast, according to the map's vague markings, that area seemed to be a perilous place in the Magical Beast Mountain Range known as the Mist Swamp, filled with toxic miasma all year round, inhabited by many poisonous insects and beasts, with a harsh environment and rarely visited by humans. We go here. Lin Yan pointed to the blurry shadow on the map representing the swamp. This scale points that way. It is filled with toxic miasma, which might be beneficial for your cultivation of the poison scripture, but it is also more dangerous. Furthermore, he looked at Xiao Yixian. Your calamity poison body is likely related to the poison attribute scale among these 9 keys. That place might be your land of opportunity. Xiao Yixian's eyes brightened slightly. The toxic miasma environment was truly like a fish in water for her. If she could find an ancient soul scale relic related to the poison attribute, it would undoubtedly be of huge help in her control of the calamity poison body. However, before that, we must first leave this underground and return to the surface. Lin Yan put away the map. Although Yulan and the remnant were here, this was not a place to stay for long. Above, there was still the threat of the Hall of Souls, powerful enemies. Although the collapse of the Earth's veins might have temporarily blocked or misled them, so they had to move as soon as possible. He contacted Kai Rong, who was guarding outside the cave, through the soul contract. Kai Rong sent a response, indicating that the outside lake area was relatively stable and they could leave. The two bade farewell to Yulan, who had dived into the pool to heal, and promised to return in the future. Yulan respectfully agreed and indicated that he would recover his strength as soon as possible. Retracing their steps, passing through the curtain of crystal stalactites, they returned once again to the underground lake dotted with fluorescent light. Kai Rong was waiting anxiously, and upon seeing the two appear safely, he breathed a sigh of relief. Master, above, it seems to have quieted down. However, the commotion from the earth collapsing earlier was too great. I fear it has already attracted quite a bit of attention. Kai Rong transmitted his voice, his massive head looking toward the dome. Lin Yan also sensed it. The heart-burning seal on his back was still burning hot, but the feeling of being clearly locked onto had weakened significantly. It seemed the other party had temporarily lost their precise location, though they might still be able to sense the general direction. They had to move far away from this area as soon as possible. Kai Rong, can you still find a way to the outside world? Something as concealed as possible, Lin Yan asked. Kai Rong carefully sensed the flow of the water and air, then nodded. There's an underground water vein leading to an underground river exit in the northeast, which should be behind a canyon waterfall on the surface. It is quite concealed. We will take that path. Led by Kai Rong, they dived into the water once again and entered a narrower and more winding underground river channel. This time, without the push of the dark river, they relied entirely on Kai Rong's guidance in their own swimming. They did not know how much time had passed, but ahead, the rumbling sound of water could be vaguely heard, and faint daylight was penetrating through. The current also became rapid. We are almost at the exit, Kai Rong reminded them. The two spirits lifted, and they accelerated forward. Soon, a cave entrance obscured by a waterfall's water curtain appeared before their eyes. Through the intense water flow, they could see that it was daytime outside, as well as lush greenery. Kai Rong rushed out of the waterfall first, with Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian following closely behind. Fresh air rushed toward them. Before them was a deep canyon, with towering cliffs on both sides and dense vegetation. They were rushing out from behind a waterfall that was dozens of jong high, landing in the deep pool below. Finally back on the surface. The two climbed onto the edge of the pool and lay on the ground, exhausted, feeling the warmth of the sunlight through the gaps in the canyon and the long-lost fresh air. Chiron also lay beside them, breathing greedily. However, before they could even catch their breath, Lin Yan's soul perception, though his control was raw, its range was immense, suddenly captured a chaotic energy fluctuation coming from the forest above the canyon, about a few miles away, and a familiar, disgusting, cold soul force aura. Not just one. Moreover, it seemed to be fiercely clashing with another violent magical beast aura. It's the Hall of Souls. What are they fighting with? Lin Yan sat up abruptly, looking toward that direction with sharp eyes. Xiao Yixian also stood up vigilantly. Chiron let out a low roar, revealing a defensive posture. There aren't many of them, the energy fluctuations are at the Doling level. There are 3 people, besieging A. It seems to be a rank 5 feet purple lightning cloud leopard. Relying on his powerful soul perception, Lin Yan managed to discern the situation. Why would the Hall of Souls be here? Was it a coincidence, or were they coming for him? Do you want to go take a look? Xiao Yixian asked. Lin Yan pondered for a moment. The Hall of Souls was his mortal enemy, if he could catch them off guard. Besides, the other party was fighting a rank 5 magical beast, so there might be an opportunity. Conceal your auras and get close to observe. If there is an opportunity. A cold light flashed in Lin Yan's eyes, then leave them behind. The 3 dragon immediately suppressed their auras and, utilizing the complex terrain of the canyon and the cover of dense vegetation, silently crept toward the direction of the battle. Soon, they lurked on a cliff overlooking the battlefield. In the forest below, it was a mess. Trees were broken, and the ground was scorched black. 3 figures wearing black robes and hideous ghost masks were arranged in a triangular formation, besieging a giant leopard with a body length of 3 jong, covered in purple fur, with silver lightning winding around its body. It was indeed a rank 5 magical beast, the purple lightning cloud leopard. Those 3 black-robed men had 2 people holding black chains, with eerie green ghost fire burning on the chains, constantly coiling around and binding the movements of the purple lightning cloud leopard, while the other person held a white bone staff, chanting incantations and summoning clusters of pale white soul fire to bombard the purple lightning cloud leopard. The 3 cooperated tacitly and were clearly well trained, with strengths around low star doling. Although the purple lightning cloud leopard was fierce and its lightning power was strong, under such a siege of restraining soul techniques, the ghost fire chains seemed to be able to conduct the lightning to a certain extent and weaken its power. It was already covered in wounds, roaring repeatedly, and defeat was only a matter of time. However, what made Lin Yan's pupils shrink was not the battle itself. It was that the black-robed man holding the white bone staff had 2 clusters of pale cold flames burning in the eye sockets of a large skull embedded at the top of his staff. The aura of that flame was 5 parts similar to the purifying soul flame within the pure corrosion soul seal between his eyebrows. It was just weaker and more impure, as if it were an inferior imitation. Is that a child flame of the bone-chilling flame, or an imitation of the purifying soul flame? Lin Yan's heart shook violently. The people of the Hall of Souls actually possessed similar power. Was it a coincidence, or, related to that, ancestor of 10,000 scales? Just as he was in a state of suspicion and uncertainty, the system prompt suddenly rang out, carrying a rare hint of urgency. Warning, detected high concentration, Hall of Souls hunting squad, marker. The target squad is equipped with a soul guidance compass and may have already captured the faint residual fluctuations of the host's heart-burning seal, or pure corrosion soul seal, and is currently conducting a dragnet search in this area. It is recommended to leave immediately or annihilate them. Triggered emergency side quest, eliminate the eyes and ears. Quest content, kill or expel this 3-man Hall of Souls squad to ensure your tracks are not exposed. Quest rewards, points times 300, random zone tier high level do technique times 1, Hall of Souls standard equipment can be researched times 1. Failure penalty, tracks exposed, attracting higher level Hall of Souls pursuit. Lin Yan's eyes turned completely cold. It seemed that leaving quietly was impossible. These 3 pieces of trash from the Hall of Souls must die here. Moreover, he really wanted to figure out what was going on with that pale cold flame in the skull. Chapter 33, Oriole behind the mantis, first test of the soul seal. Above the canyon, the mountain wind was piercing, rustling the dense canopy, yet it could not drown out the roar of energy and the dying growls of the beast from the forest below. Lin Yan crouched at the edge of the cliff, his gaze as sharp as a hawk's, piercing through the gaps in the leaves to take in every detail of the battlefield below. His soul perception spread out like an invisible spiderweb, not only locking onto the positions and energy fluctuations of the 3 black-robed men but also carefully probing every subtle change in the pale cold flame within the skull. The one on the left holding the chain, a 3-star doling, affinity leaning towards darkness. The ghost fire on the chain is adept at corroding doji and paralyzing nerves, movement speed is average, weak point on the right. The cold, precise analysis flowed through Lin Yan's heart like a machine. The extreme calmness brought by the pure corrosion soul seal was fully utilized at this moment, allowing him to discard all distracting thoughts and emotional fluctuations, leaving only the purest tactical deduction. The one on the right holding the chain, a 2-star doling peak, agile figure, the chain's movement trajectory is tricky, accustomed to using the companion on the left as a shield, attacks are insidious. The core threat comes from the one at the back holding the bone staff, a 4-star doling, soul power is solid, that pale cold flame in the skull, is essentially a severely diluted, mixed with other sinister soul power, inferior seed flame of purifying soul flame. It has a weak pull on my soul seal, but the threat is not significant. Its spellcasting pre-swing is obvious, needs close quarters interruption. Xiao Yixian was beside him, her jade green eyes fixed tightly on the scene below, grey purple poison power lingering silently at her fingertips. She was also observing, looking for the most suitable timing and angle for a poison power invasion. Chiron was lurking in the shadows of the rocks further back, his dark golden vertical pupils burning with fighting intent, molten energy surging quietly within his body, waiting only for Lin Yan's command. System, simulate the best raid route and attack sequence. Lin Yan thought silently. Simulating, calculating enemy reaction time, potential behavior of purple lightning cloud leopard, terrain obstacles. Plan generated. Host and battle pet Chiron frontal feint to attract attention. Xiao Yixian flanks to corrode the 2 chain dolings with virulent poison. Host uses seed flame of void devouring flame to interfere with the bone staff doling spellcasting. Chiron exerts full power to attempt to severely injure one. Key, speed and surprise. Success rate, about 70%. Recommended priority target, the 2 chain dolings. 70%, that was enough. Listen for my signal. Lin Yan's voice was extremely low, yet carried an unquestionable decisiveness. Chiron, when I count to 3, you spit a lava fire pillar from the front. Don't seek to kill, just create maximum chaos and attract firepower. Xiao Yixian, left 3, right 4, poison corrode the meridians, the faster the better. I'll deal with the one holding the staff. Yes, Master Lin Yan. Chiron and Xiao Yixian responded simultaneously. Below, the battle was nearing its end. The purple lightning cloud leopard was covered in blood, its purple fur charred black in large patches by the ghost fire, and its silver lightning had become intermittent, its aura withered. It let out an unwilling roar, exhausting its last strength, and a thick purple lightning pillar bombarded the chain doling directly in front. Now. 1, 2, 3, act. Just as Lin Yan's internal countdown finished, below the cliff, Kai Rong's lava giant mouth, which had long been ready, suddenly opened. Roar. A violent lava fire pillar, with a diameter far exceeding the previous ones and interspersed with dark golden light, erupted like a volcanic eruption, carrying a scorching pressure that burned everything, slamming into the battlefield from the side above. The target was not any specific person, but directly hitting the open space between the three black-robed men and the purple lightning cloud leopard. Who is it? The three black-robed men turned in shock. This sudden attack had power far exceeding their estimates, and that scorching, violent fire attribute energy was naturally contradictory to their sinister, cold soul power. The lava fire pillar exploded, flames and gravel splashing everywhere, instantly throwing the original formation into disarray. The scorching heat wave caused the two chain dolings to pause, their protective ghost fire flickering unsteadily. In this moment of chaos, two almost imperceptible great purple streams of light, like venomous snakes emerging from their holes, took advantage of the explosive smoke cover to shoot cunningly toward the two chain dolings. Xiao Yixian had struck. She pushed the poison power she had just refined, which fused a trace of Shuangming true water characteristics, to the limit. The toxicity added an extra layer of cold, corrosive power, specializing in breaking Doqi defenses and striking directly at vital meridians. The three-star doling on the left reacted slightly faster, roaring as he swung his chain to parry. The great purple light hit the chain, instantly corroding it with hissing white smoke, and a strand of cold poison power spread up along the chain, making his arm numb. The two-star doling on the right was distracted by a piece of flying lava gravel and failed to avoid it completely. The great purple light grazed his shoulder, his robes instantly rotted, and his skin felt a strange, burning, yet bone-chilling pain, and the Doqi circulation in his meridians immediately became sluggish. Careful, there's an ambush, it's poison. Both were shocked and angry. However, the real killing move had only just arrived. Just as the lava fire pillar exploded and the two chain dolings were injured by the poison, a figure shot down from the shadows of the cliff like a ghost. The speed was so fast that it left trails in the air. It was Lin Yan, who had pushed, explosive step, to the limit. His target was the four-star doling staff user who had just raised his bone staff, attempting to stabilize the formation and find the attacker. Arrogant, courting death. Although the staff user was shocked, he was not panicked, a fierce look flashing in his eyes. He was the strongest of the three, with rich combat experience. Seeing Lin Yan charging directly at him, he did not dodge or evade, and the obscure incantation in his mouth was completed instantly. The pale cold flame in the eye sockets of the skull at the top of the bone staff flared up. Soul flame impact. A condensed pale fire pillar, carrying the bone-chilling cold and corrosive characteristics that could freeze the soul, shot toward Lin Yan. Wherever it passed, the air seemed to be frozen into fine ice crystals. Facing this strike, which was enough to severely damage the soul of an ordinary doling, Lin Yan's eyes remained cold and calm. He did not even make any defensive or evasive movements, but between his eyebrows, that pale, pure corrosion soul seal suddenly lit up. A more refined, more ancient, and colder soul power fluctuation radiated from Lin Yan as the center. The incoming pale fire pillar, the moment it touched this fluctuation, actually trembled and twisted violently, as if a subject meeting a monarch. Its internal energy structure began to destabilize, its power greatly reduced, and even a portion of the pale flame, like a swallow returning to its nest, actively broke away from the fire pillar, floating toward the soul seal between Lin Yan's eyebrows, and was quietly absorbed. What? This is impossible. The staff user's pupils shrank, and he exclaimed in shock. The purifying soul flame he relied on to make his name was actually so easily suppressed, even absorbed by the opponent. The aura of the soul seal on the opponent actually made the seed flame in his skull feel fear and submission. What the hell is this thing? In this split second when he lost his composure, Lin Yan had already passed through the weakened pale fire pillar and approached him. His right hand formed a claw, the pitch black and profound seed flame of void devouring flame wrapping around his fingertips, carrying a terrifying aura that swallowed everything, and he grabbed fiercely at the skull burning with the pale cold flame. Void devouring flame claw. At the same time, his left fist struck out silently, the double dark energy of 8 extremities collapsed compressed to the limit on his fist, aiming directly at the staff user's heart. The staff user was a 4-star doling after all, and at the critical moment of life and death, he exploded with all his potential. He roared, not caring about the skull. A pitch black soul power shield appeared on his left hand to block his chest, and his right hand swept the bone staff, smashing toward Lin Yan's head, attempting to force him back. Clang. The void-devouring flame claw collided with the skull. Pitch black flames and pale cold flames intertwined and annihilated violently. The skull let out an unbearable moan, cracks appeared on the surface, and the pale seed flame inside seemed to encounter its natural enemy, swaying and retreating frantically. Puff. The dark energy of 8 extremities collapsed hit the soul power shield. The shield vibrated violently, cracks like spiderwebs appeared, and a tricky, scorching force penetrated the defense, drilling into the staff user's body, causing his blood to churn, and he let out a muffled groan, his offensive momentum stalling. Lin Yan ignored the staff smashing toward his head, just tilted his head slightly, letting it graze his temple, bringing up a trail of blood. His right hand, 5 fingers suddenly closed. Crack. The skull burning with the pale cold flame was actually ripped straight off the bone staff. Pitch black flames instantly enveloped it, frantically devouring the pale seed flame and mixed soul power inside. Ah, my soul weapon. The staff user let out a scream of heartbreak and terror. This skull was the core of the soul weapon he had cultivated with countless heart's blood, connected to his soul. Being destroyed at this moment caused his soul to suffer a backlash, and his vision went black. Opportunity not to be missed. A cold light flashed in Lin Yan's eyes, and just as he was about to end this person, a roar from Kai Rong and a cry of surprise from Xiao Yixian came from behind. It turned out that the 2 injured chain dolings, seeing their leader in danger, ignored their own injuries and poison erosion and rushed to rescue him. One swung the ghost fire chain to entangle Lin Yan, and the other rushed toward Xiao Yixian, who was manipulating poison power to interfere with them. Kai Rong was temporarily entangled by the ghost fire chain released by one of them, his movement hindered. Get lost, Lin Yan shouted coldly, without even turning his head, and slapped out with his backhand. The void-devouring flame in his palm turned into a pitch-black fire vortex, facing the incoming ghost fire chain. At the same time, he stepped with explosive step, again, his figure like lightning, abandoning the pursuit of the staff user, and turned to rush toward the 2-star doling who was rushing toward Xiao Yixian. Must ensure Xiao Yixian's safety first. And, at this distance. Die. The 2-star doling saw Lin Yan coming to the rescue, a grim smile on his face, the chain like a venomous dragon, stabbing directly at Xiao Yixian's heart. He calculated that Lin Yan would not have time to intercept completely. However, he underestimated Xiao Yixian's strength, and also underestimated Lin Yan's speed and decisiveness. Facing the stabbing chain, Xiao Yixian did not panic. A cold light flashed in her jade eyes. Instead of retreating, she advanced, her hands crossed and waved, more than a dozen, ice soul poison needles, as thin as ox hair and tempered with poison and the cold energy of Shuangming true water, shot out like a rainstorm, covering the opponent's whole body. At the same time, her footwork was mysterious, narrowly dodging the sharpest tip of the chain. Only her shoulder was grazed and a blood wound opened. The Doling was forced into a flurry by the poison needles, his momentum slowed. In the time of this delay, Lin Yan had arrived. He pointed his fingers like a sword. The fingertips were no longer the void-devouring flame, but a strand of pure cold soul power condensed from the pure corrosion soul seal between his eyebrows, mixed with the scorching aura of the green lotus core flame, forming a cyan white intertwined, weird and sharp soul flame finger sword, pointing at the Doling's labella with lightning speed. Purifying soul flame finger. The Doling only felt a weird force of intertwined cold and heat instantly break through his remaining dochi defense, stabbing into his labella, straight into the depths of his soul. The luster in his eyes quickly dimmed, his body stiffened, and then he fell down softly, with no breath. The soul had been completely frozen and corroded by that strand of pure corrosion soul power. One-hit kill. Lin Yan did not even look at the fallen corpse. His figure turned again, rushing toward the three-star Doling who was fighting with Chiron and was in pain from the erosion of Xiao Yixian's poison power. At this moment, the staff user also barely suppressed the soul backlash, with a face full of resentment and fear, about to perform some kind of escape technique or distress signal. Chiron, burn them to ashes. Lin Yan ordered through the soul contract. Chiron roared, ignoring the pain of his hind legs being burned by the ghost fire. The lava energy in his body exploded without reservation, and a dark golden lava breath, more condensed than before, sprayed fiercely toward the three-star Doling. The Doling was already heavily poisoned, his movement slow, and facing Chiron's full-strength blow, he only had time to hold the chain horizontally in front of him. Boom. The lava breath engulfed him along with the chain. The shrill scream came to an abrupt end. In an instant, the three black-robed men, one dead, one seriously injured, the one engulfed by lava couldn't survive either, only the staff user who lost his soul weapon and suffered soul damage remained. Seeing his two subordinates killed in an instant, and his side's strongest soul flame suppressed by the opponent for no reason, the staff user had no more fighting intent, only boundless fear left. He looked at Lin Yan with resentment. An extra pitch black jade talisman appeared in his hand, and he was about to crush it. That was a distress and teleportation signal. Want to leave? Lin Yan's eyes were cold, and the soul seal between his eyebrows shone again. This time, he actively triggered a trace of the ancient majesty belonging to the ancestor of 10,000 scales, in the soul seal, mixed with the devouring will of the void devouring flame, turning into an invisible soul impact, crashing fiercely toward the staff user. Soul might, deterrence. The staff user's hand, which was about to crush the jade talisman, suddenly stiffened. His soul felt like it was hit by a heavy hammer, and his consciousness fell into a brief blankness and fear originating from the life level. In this split second, Lin Yan's figure appeared in front of him like a ghost, his right hand covered in pitch black flames, gently pressed on his crown. Void devouring flame, soul devouring. No screaming, no struggling. The staff user's eyes quickly dimmed and became hollow. His body fell softly as if all his bones had been pulled out. His soul origin and memories had been instantly devoured, decomposed, and turned into pure soul power to nourish Lin Yan by the void devouring flame, while some memory fragments were quickly browsed by Lin Yan. A few breaths later, Lin Yan withdrew his hand, his face slightly pale. Continuous high-intensity soul attacks and usage were quite a burden for him, who had just received the soul seal. But a hint of gravity and realization flashed in his eyes. From the memory fragments of the staff user, he learned several key pieces of information. 1. This team was indeed affiliated with the Hall of Souls Jama Empire branch, ordered to search for abnormal fire attribute targets, pointing to Lin Yan, and special energy fluctuations, possibly pointing to earth-vein anomalies in this area. 2. The soul flame technology in their hands was a replica developed by the Hall of Souls by studying the pale cold flame, remaining in some ancient ruins, suspected to be related to the Hun clan with power far less than the original, and significant side effects, but easy to quickly master and control, used to arm low to mid-level personnel. 3. Recently, the higher-ups of the Hall of Souls seem to have greatly increased interest in the northwest region of the Magical Beast Mountain Range, mobilizing more manpower, seemingly looking for more than one thing, one of which was suspected to be related to ancient scale-type ruins pointing to ancient soul scale. This three-person team was just one of the peripheral scouts. 4. They carried a special soul guidance compass, which could amplify the sensing of Hall of Souls marks like the heart-burning seal, and also had a weak reaction to high-level soul power of the same origin like the pure corrosion soul seal. This was also the reason why they could be vaguely attracted by Lin Yan's soul seal. Hall of Souls, indeed also searching for ruins related to the ancient soul scale. Lin Yan felt a chill in his heart. It seemed that there was indeed some unknown close connection between the Hall of Souls and that ancestor of 10,000 scales, and perhaps even a part of the Hall of Souls power source came from the research and looting of that existence's legacy. This place is not suitable for staying long. Their disappearance will soon be discovered. Lin Yan quickly collected the valuable items from the three black-robed men, including the damaged skull, soul guidance compass, and some Hall of Souls tokens and pills, and then burned the corpses with fire. The dying purple lightning cloud leopard looked at Lin Yan, let out a low roar, struggled to get up, and stumbled into the depths of the dense forest. Lin Yan did not stop it. He was not a person who loved killing. Go, leave immediately, head towards the mist swamp. Lin Yan took Xiao Yixian and Chiron, whose injuries had worsened, quickly cleared the traces, and hurried toward the northeast indicated by the ancient soul scale. About half an hour after they left, a figure shrouded in thick black mist, with an aura far surpassing a Doling, appeared like a ghost in this forest land that had just experienced a battle. He squatted down, carefully perceiving the residual energy traces, especially the pure corrosion, soul power remnant that was almost imperceptible but made a certain power in his body palpitate, and the corner of his mouth under the mask slowly hooked into a cold and greedy arc. Found you, the carrier of the key. Chapter 34, Poisonous Miasma, Lost Path, and the first appearance of the Snake Lady. Leaving behind the battlefield filled with the stench of blood and burning, Lin Yan and the three, including the Flood Dragon, did not pause for a moment. Like three shadows merging into the mountain forest, they sped toward the northeast. Chiron's injuries had worsened due to the earlier outburst, causing it to stumble slightly as it moved, but it still forced itself forward, its massive lava claws striking the ground with dull thuds. Lin Yan's complexion was paler than before, and the pale flame mark between his brows pulsed faintly, emitting a cold aura that fluctuated in intensity. Clearly, the continuous use of the pure corrosion soul seal had placed a significant burden on his soul, which had not yet fully adapted it. His thoughts flickered between extreme calmness and dull stabs of pain, while fragments of memories that were not his own flashed through his mind, a massive scaled claw sweeping across a pitch-black starry sky, an angry roar shattering mountains and rivers, and a blurry face filled with bone-deep hatred. The pure corrosion soul seal, is it not just power, but also a carrier of memories and obsessions? Lin Yan felt a chill in his heart. He forcibly suppressed those churning fragments and focused his attention on moving forward and remaining alert. He had to find a relatively safe place as soon as possible to properly organize and suppress this dangerous mark. Xiao Yixian followed closely behind. The wound on her shoulder had been treated with medicine she carried, but the chilling sensation from the poison's erosion and the aftermath of the soul force impact still made her frown from time to time. The ancient soul scale in her hand, which pointed northeast, was now slightly hot, and the resonance grew stronger as they moved forward, as if their destination were not far away. The terrain along the way gradually changed. The towering cliffs and dense primeval forests began to decrease, replaced by low shrubs, wet, soft mud, and an increasing number of petals emitting a rotten stench. The air became humid and stuffy, visibility dropped, and a faint, sweet, fishy gray mist began to permeate the forest. We are almost at the outskirts of the swamp. Lin Yan identified the environment and warned. Watch your step in the mist. There may be poisonous insects, miasma, or even hidden swamp beasts. No sooner had he finished speaking than a seemingly calm patch of mud to their left suddenly exploded. A monster insect, as thick as a bucket, covered in dark green slime, and with a giant mouth full of dense, sharp teeth, lunged out, springing toward Kai Rong in the lead like a spring. It was a peak tier 2 inches corrosion swamp arrow insect, adept at lurking and ambushing, its saliva containing highly corrosive and paralyzing toxins. Although injured, Kai Rong's reaction was not slow. It let out a low roar, its less injured forelimb covered in a layer of dark red lava armor, and it slapped fiercely at the incoming giant mouth. Bang! The corrosion swamp arrow insect was knocked to the side. The slime splashed onto the lava armor, making a hissing sound and corroding small pits, but it failed to penetrate. Kai Rong's other foreclaw followed, stabbing its sharp claws into the insect's body and pinning it firmly into the mud. Lava energy erupted, instantly burning it to charcoal. These insects are very sensitive to fire attribute energy. Lin Yan looked at the corrosion marks on Kai Rong's claws, his eyes narrowing slightly. Kai Rong's attributes would be somewhat countered here. The mist has thickened, Xiao Yixian suddenly said, her emerald eyes scanning the surroundings vigilantly. The gray miasma was becoming dense at a visible rate, and its color was gradually turning into an ominous dark green. The sweet, fishy smell in the air became more pronounced, bringing a slight burning sensation and dizziness when inhaled into the lungs. It's active poisonous miasma. Hold your breath. Use doqi to filter it. Lin Yan immediately shouted, simultaneously circulating his doqi to form a thin filtering layer over his mouth and nose. Xiao Yixian immediately followed suit. Her poisoned body had extremely high resistance to toxins, but this miasma was clearly extraordinary, mixed with various toxins and putrid swamp gas. Kai Rong also let out a low roar, faint flames spraying from the gaps in its lava armor in an attempt to disperse the approaching miasma, but the effect was limited. Instead, the energy fluctuations attracted even more things hidden in the miasma, countless tiny, dark green-winged poisonous mosquitoes buzzing over like a black cloud, their mouthparts glinting with cold light. Troublesome. Lin Yan frowned and was about to strike, but Xiao Yixian stepped forward. Let me handle this. She formed a strange hand seal, and the poison force in her body, tempered by swimming through water, flowed out slowly, transforming into a faint, almost invisible grayish-purple halo around her. The halo expanded, coming into contact with those poisonous mosquitoes in the dark green miasma. An amazing scene occurred. Those fierce poisonous mosquitoes seemed to have encountered a natural predator, letting out shrill hisses and scrambling to turn and flee. Some that flew slowly even stiffened and fell after touching the grayish-purple halo. The surrounding miasma was also subtly repelled and neutralized by this special poison force halo, becoming much thinner. My poison force seems to have strong suppression and affinity toward these natural toxins. Xiao Yixian was also somewhat surprised. She could feel that the toxins in this swamp seemed to be afraid of the trace of a higher level, purer essence of poison contained within her poison force. Very good. Lin Yan nodded. Your poison body has become an advantage here. Continue forward, stay close to me and be responsible for guarding against poisonous creatures. With Xiao Yixian's poison force clearing the way, their speed increased significantly. However, the swamp environment became increasingly harsh. The muddy path could turn into a life-devouring trap at any moment. Poisonous snakes coiled on dead trees, poisonous toads lurking at the bottom of petals, and even strange plants capable of spitting venom appeared one after another. Fortunately, with Xiao Yixian's poison force deterrence and precise perception, most dangers could be avoided or neutralized in advance. As they went deeper, the color of the miasma grew deeper, gradually shifting from dark green to an eerie purple black. The light was dim, the surroundings were deathly silent, with only the squelching sound of feet stepping into mud and the occasional eerie hissing of unknown creatures. The ancient soul scale in his hand had become scorching hot, and the resonance reached its peak, pointing directly to an area ahead completely shrouded in thick, impenetrable purple-black miasma. That should be the place. Lin Yan stopped and looked solemnly at the wall-like miasma. Even with the protection of Xiao Yixian's poison force, he could feel the terrifying toxicity contained within the purple-black miasma. He feared that a doling expert would not last long if they rushed in. Moreover, soul perception was greatly hindered and corroded there, unable to probe even an inch. My poison force is cheering. Xiao Yixian whispered suddenly. The ancient soul scale in her hand vibrated incessantly, and the source of poison force within her was also spinning uncontrollably, transmitting a strong desire and intimacy toward that purple-black miasma. It was as if that place were the homeland where her poison force was born. It seems this place is indeed related to the poison attribute ancient soul scale. Lin Yan said in a low voice. But to enter, we must pass through this miasma. Xiao Yixian, can your poison force support us through it? Xiao Yixian sensed carefully for a moment, her brow furrowing slightly. I can try to wrap us in poison force. It should be able to resist most of the erosion, but my total poison force is limited, and the range of this miasma is unknown. Once it runs out halfway, she looked at Kai Rong. Also, Kai Rong's fire attribute will be severely countered here, and my poison force might not be able to fully protect its massive body. Kai Rong let out a low roar, conveying a mental fluctuation. Master, I can try to shrink my size to reduce consumption. It saw the lava light on its body flow, and its massive 5 zhong long body shrank at a visible rate, eventually becoming only about 2 zhong. Although still not small, it was much more agile, and its aura was increasingly restrained. This was a semi-dormant state it was forced into due to insufficient energy after being injured. It has to be this way. Lin Yan nodded and looked at the purple-black miasma again. His words suddenly stopped, and he turned his head abruptly to look behind them in the direction they had come. The pure corrosion soul seal between his brows suddenly sent a slight tremor of being spied upon. Almost simultaneously, the system alarm sounded in his mind. Warning, high-intensity stealth tracking detected. Source, about 3 li behind. The aura highly matches the previous, Black Mist expert, estimated Do Huang level. The opponent seems to have used some kind of high-level stealth soul technique and is slowly approaching. Someone is following us. Extremely strong. Lin Yan's voice was cold. He grabbed Xiao Yixian and signaled Kai Rong to immediately restrain all its aura, quickly hiding behind a dense patch of poisonous vines that emitted a pungent odor nearby. The 3, including the flood dragon, had just hidden when a cluster of black mist, thick as ink, silently emerged from the grey miasma behind them. The black mist drifted slowly and stopped not far from where they had just been standing. The mist churned, vaguely outlining a tall, thin humanoid silhouette. 2 points of scarlet light at the face position flickered like ghost fires, staring quietly at the purple-black miasma barrier ahead, seemingly observing and evaluating. Although separated by a distance and concealed by miasma and poisonous vines, Lin Yan still felt a cold and evil soul force sweeping over the surroundings like a tide, making the soul seal between his brows slightly hot. He had to fully activate the seed flame of void-devouring flame and the breath-concealing talisman to cover all his own fluctuations. Xiao Yixian and Kai Rong also held their breath, not daring to make any movement. The black mist expert stayed in place for a moment. Its scarlet gaze scanned the purple-black miasma, and it seemed to be capturing some residual traces in the air. Finally, it did not choose to rush directly into the obviously extremely dangerous purple-black miasma but turned around slowly. The black mist, as if alive, drifted toward another direction, deeper into the swamp, and soon disappeared into the gray miasma. Not until that heart-stopping, cold soul force fluctuation had completely faded away did Lin Yan and the other two breathe a sigh of relief. It's a pursuit team from the Hall of Souls, and very strong. Xiao Yixian was still fearful. He seems to not have found us. What he locked onto should be the resonance fluctuation of the pure corrosion soul seal, or the ancient soul scale. We restrained ourselves in time, and just happened to be on the edge of this natural poisonous barrier, which interfered with his perception. Lin Yan analyzed, but his expression was not good, but he was clearly attracted by this swamp, or rather, by whatever the ancient soul scale is pointing to. He went deeper into the swamp. I'm afraid there are other entrances or clues there. Ahead was an unknown purple-black dead zone, behind was a terrifying pursuit team from the Hall of Souls. They seemed to be trapped here. Are we still going in? Xiao Yixian looked at the purple-black miasma and then at Lin Yan. Intuition told her that there might be something crucial to her inside, but the risk was also immense. Lin Yan's eyes flickered. He looked at the scorching ancient soul scale in his hand and felt the faint repulsion and wariness from the soul seal between his brows towards something deep in the purple-black miasma ahead that was the remnant will of the ancestor of 10,000 scales, in the pure corrosion soul seal, which seemed unfriendly to the poison attribute entity here. Go in. After a moment, Lin Yan made a decision, his eyes firm. The people from the Hall of Souls have already intervened. We can't hide for long. Rather than waiting passively, it is better to explore actively and look for possible opportunities or ways out. This place is related to your poison body. Perhaps it is your home field. Kai Rong, your injuries are not light, and your attributes are countered. Stay here to support. Keep hidden well. If we have not come out in 3 days, or encounter an emergency, you may decide for yourself whether to stay or leave. Kai Rong let out a low roar. Although reluctant, it understood this was the best choice. It nodded and silently slipped into a more hidden mud cave. Let's go. Lin Yan nodded to Xiao Yixian. Xiao Yixian took a deep breath and fully circulated the 7-colored poison manual. The tempered poison force within her surged out, forming a thick grayish-purple light shield around the two of them. The surface of the shield flowed with wisps of the cold aura of swimming true water. She took the lead and stepped into the wall like purple-black miasma. The light shield came into contact with the miasma, making a hissing sound. The purple-black poisonous gas crazily eroded the grayish-purple poison force shield. Xiao Yixian's face turned pale. She felt the poison force in her body consuming rapidly. The toxicity of this miasma far exceeded the outside world, and it carried a strange activity, as if it had a will of its own, constantly looking for weak points in the shield. Lin Yan followed closely, ready to provide support at any time. He could also feel the destructive poison force outside the shield. If it weren't for the special nature of Xiao Yixian's poison force, it would likely have been eroded and penetrated instantly. The two trudged forward with difficulty in the purple-black miasma, where visibility was less than 3 feet. Every step was cautious. Not only did they have to resist the miasma, but they also had to watch out for potential swamp traps underfoot. The surroundings were deathly silent, with only the hissing sound of poison force eroding the shield and the two's heavy breathing. They did not know how long they had walked. Just as Xiao Yixian's poison force was about to bottom out and her face was as pale as paper, the thick miasma had suddenly turned violently. Immediately after, a crisp and melodious, yet filled with endless coldness and charm, woman's voice seemed to ring directly in their souls. Yo Tilda, after waiting for so many years, finally some guests have been able to walk here. And 2 little guys, one with the annoying scale smell on him, and the other. Hee, this poison force is pure enough to make this sister feel a bit tempted. Tilda. Following the voice, the miasma had automatically parted, revealing a passage. At the end of the passage, one could vaguely see a strange wetland covered in purple-black poison light and filled with enchanting giant flowers. And in the center of the wetland, on a simple throne constructed of white bones and vines, a graceful figure with stunning curves, barely covered by purple-black poison mist, was lazily leaning. A pair of soul-stealing, yet completely deep purple eyes were examining the two intruders with great interest. Chapter 35. Lost in the mist and miasma, guided by scale light. The dense forest retreated rapidly behind them. Slippery moss and tangled tree roots became a blur beneath their feet. Lin Yan, Xiao Yixian, and Kai Rong rushed forward without daring to pause for even a moment. Kai Rong's injuries had worsened. The wound on its hind leg, scorched by ghost fire, was charred black and oozed dark red pus. It clearly limped as it moved, yet it gritted its teeth against the pain, staying close to Lin Yan's face. The tenacious vitality of the magma earth-walking dragon was fully revealed at this moment. Lin Yan's face remained somewhat pale, and the pure corrosion soul seal between his brows grew slightly hot with his vigorous exertion, emitting a cold fluctuation. Continuously using the power of the soul seal and engaging in high-intensity combat was a significant burden on his soul, which had just surged in power but was not yet stable. However, his eyes remained calm and sharp, his soul perception acting like the most alert radar, scanning every slight movement ahead and behind him. Xiao Yixian followed closely at Lin Yan's side, breathing slightly heavily. The wound on her shoulder had been simply treated with medicinal powder from her stash and was no longer bleeding. Her gaze occasionally swept worriedly over Kai Rong's injured leg and Lin Yan's slightly furrowed brows. At the same time, she also devoted a portion of her focus to carefully sensing the increasingly clear resonant guidance coming from the ancient soul scale. In her bosom, it was a faint yet continuous sensation of warmth, like the only lighthouse in the darkness, firmly pointing toward the northeast. System, analyze the structure of the soul guidance compass, and find its tracking principle and shielding method. While rushing, Lin Yan diverted a sliver of his consciousness to communicate with the system. Among the items he had scavenged from those 3 black-robed men, besides a few bottles of healing and recovery pills of average quality, some gold coins, and Hall of Souls identity tokens, the most valuable items were that palm-sized, jet black, soul guidance compass, covered in strange runes, and the skull that had been scorched by the seed flame of void devouring flame, its pale flames extinguished and covered in cracks. Analyzing, soul guidance compass, low-level soul artifact. The core is a fragment as soul guiding stone. Combined with specific rune arrays, it can amplify and directionally sense the unique soul markings of the Hall of Souls, such as the heart-burning seal and the residue of homologous high-level soul power, such as the pure corrosion soul seal within a certain range. Its sensing range and precision are affected by the user's soul power strength and environmental interference. Shielding interference schemes. 1. Physical destruction or long-term isolation using high-intensity heavenly flame soul power. 2. Utilize the devouring characteristics of void-swallowing flame to simulate the soul fluctuations of the surrounding environment for regional interference. Requires consumption of soul power and has high requirements for control precision. 3. Find or create a strong soul interference field, e.g., a gathering place for massive soul remains, or a region with naturally chaotic soul power. Lin Yan understood. It seemed the Hall of Souls relied on this thing to track them like hunting dogs. Among the shielding schemes, the second one was currently quite feasible. He tried to mobilize a sliver of the seed flame of void-devouring flame's power, mixing it with his own soul fluctuations, and simulated a chaotic, faint soul aura similar to the jungle environment around his body, as if putting on an invisible, camouflage suit. The fluctuations of the soul seal between his brows were also suppressed as much as possible. Sure enough, the soul guidance compass in his bosom, scavenged from the black-robed man, whose needle had previously been faintly pointing toward them, now began to sway uncertainly, as if it had lost its clear target. A little useful, Lin Yan breathed a slight sigh of relief, but he did not dare to be completely at ease. The Black Fog powerhouse who appeared later had a soul power level far exceeding these three underlings. It was very likely they had higher level tracking methods. As for that damaged skull, the system analyzed that both its material and refining technique were quite crude. It was merely a forceful fusion of a trace of impure, pale cold flame, imitation energy using a cruel method extracting the souls of living beings to refine. It had little value, but the refining runes remaining within it might have some reference value for understanding the principles of this soul flame technology of the Hall of Souls. Lin Yan stored it in the system space, leaving it for future study. As they continued to venture deeper toward the northeast, the surrounding environment began to change significantly. The air became increasingly humid and sultry, and sporadic, dark-colored petals began to appear on the ground, emitting a faint smell of humus. The shape of the trees also became strange. The branches of many trees were twisted, and the bark was covered with thick, greasy moss and fungi. The light was blocked by the increasingly dense canopy, making the forest appear dim and gloomy. "We are almost at the edge of the mist swamp," Xiao Yixian said softly. She had an instinctive familiarity with this humid, poisonous environment, and even felt a faint sense of closeness. The miasma in the air is starting to thicken. Although it is still very faint, it is already harmful to ordinary people. Lin Yan also noticed it. In his soul perception, the air began to be filled with some extremely faint, colorful poisonous gas particles, as well as the life auras of various active, toxic microorganisms and insects. This environment was a dangerous place for ordinary Do practitioners, but for Xiao Yixian, it was like a home field. "Kai Rong, can you still hold on?" Lin Yan asked through the soul contract. He could feel Kai Rong's aura declining, and the wound on its hind leg even showed signs of worsening in the humid environment. A fire attribute magical beast was truly out of place in this environment full of water vapor and damp miasma, like a fish out of water. "Master, I can still hold on for a while, but the environment here makes me very uncomfortable. My power is recovering very slowly." Kai Rong's mental fluctuation came through, carrying suppressed pain. They had to find a place for Kai Rong to rest. Before entering the deeper, more dangerous swamp, they had to restore their combat strength as much as possible. Lin Yan's gaze swept around, his soul perception carefully probing. A moment later, he pointed to a small hillside to the front left that was slightly higher and backed by a huge weathered rock. "Go there, the rock can block the wind, and the higher ground is relatively drier." The three arrived at the hillside. Behind the rock was a small, relatively dry clearing with some low shrubs. Lin Yan quickly cleared an area and let Kai Rong lie down to rest. He took out a few healing and dochi recovery pills and fed them to Kai Rong, then took out some decent quality fire attribute magical beast cores he had collected earlier and placed them beside Kai Rong to help it absorb fire attribute energy to heal. Xiao Yixian collected some herbs with insect repellent and drying effects from the surroundings, crushed them, and sprinkled them around to form a simple protective circle. She also began to treat the wound on her shoulder and took pills to regulate her breathing. Lin Yan himself sat cross-legged, regulating his breathing to recover his dochi and soul power while maximizing his soul perception to guard the surroundings. Half an hour later, Kai Rong's aura had stabilized a bit, and the wound was no longer worsening, but it would take time and a more suitable environment to fully recover. Xiao Yixian's condition was much better. In this environment where the miasma was just beginning to appear, her calamity poison body was instead in its element, absorbing the meager poison attribute energy in the air and slowly strengthening herself, her complexion even becoming a bit rosy. Lin Yan opened his eyes and looked at the ancient soul scale in his hand. At this moment, this jet black scale was emitting a warmer sensation than before, and the dark gold patterns on the scale flickered slightly as if breathing, pointing to a specific location deep in the northeast swamp. He could even vaguely feel that in that direction, there seemed to be some kind of power calling out that was homologous to this scale, but perhaps with a completely different attribute. "System, can you analyze the attributes or characteristics of the next possible ruin based on the resonance of the ancient soul scale?" Lin Yan asked in his heart. Detected enhanced resonance of the ancient soul scale with clear directionality. Combined with environmental characteristics miasma, swamp and information obtained by the host, the 9 keys correspond to different attributes. It is preliminarily inferred that the next ruin may be related to attributes such as poison, wood, or water, yin cold variant. Specific analysis requires closer proximity. Warning, the energy field in this area is complex, with a large number of life and highly toxic reactions. Danger level, high. It is recommended that the host proceed deeper only after fully recovering and making sufficient anti-poison preparations. A poison attribute ruin. Lin Yan looked at Xiao Yixian. This might truly be her place of opportunity. Lin Yan, this ancient soul scale, seems very excited. Xiao Yixian also took out her own ancient soul scale. The scale trembled slightly in her palm, and her great purple poison energy resonated strangely with the dark gold patterns on the scale, even staining the poison energy at her fingertips with a faint dark gold hue. "I can feel that in that direction, something is attracting it, and it is also attracting my poison energy." Curiosity and longing flickered in her eyes. For her, who urgently needed to control her calamity poison body and increase her strength, this sensation was undoubtedly enormously attractive. "We will go in once Kai Rong is feeling a bit better." Lin Yan nodded. Although it was dangerous, the opportunity was equally rare. Moreover, they needed to find a relatively safe place to stay and resources as soon as possible to increase their strength and cope with the increasingly close pursuit by the Hall of Souls. However, just as Lin Yan was preparing to continue regulating his breathing, the pure corrosion soul seal between his brows jumped violently without any warning. An extremely faint, yet coldly alarming warning carrying a strong sense of threat pierced into the depths of his soul like a fine needle. Almost simultaneously, his soul perception, extended to its limit, captured a fleeting yet chilling fluctuation of soul power at the edge of the dense forest about 10+ miles behind him that made his hair stand on end. That fluctuation was at least 70% similar to the aura of the black-robed man he had sensed before. It was just more obscure, as if the other party was also deliberately hiding, but the fleeting moment was still captured by the highly vigilant Lin Yan. They caught up so quickly. Lin Yan was shocked. The opponent's speed and tracking ability far exceeded his estimates. Was it because of the fluctuation of the pure corrosion soul seal? Or was it because the soul guidance compass was still effective in a more advanced version? He stood up abruptly, looking toward the dense forest behind him with sharp eyes. "Prepare to move out. The pursuers have arrived. They are about 10+ miles away and are closing in." Xiao Yixian's expression changed. She immediately put away the ancient soul scale and entered a state of alert. Kai Rong also struggled to stand up, growling low, "Master, I can walk." Lin Yan glanced at Kai Rong's injured leg, then looked at the swamp area ahead, where light gray mist had already begun to diffuse. Entering the swamp meant complex terrain and pervasive poisonous miasma. Perhaps they could use the environment to shake off the pursuers, but it also meant they would face more unknown dangers. There was no time to hesitate. "Go, into the swamp," Lin Yan ordered decisively. "Kai Rong, try to keep up and watch your step. Xiao Yixian, scout the path ahead, watch for changes in the poisonous miasma and possible traps." He quickly distributed the remaining medicinal pills to Kai Rong and Xiao Yixian, while he himself activated the void swallowing flame again, expanding the range of his simulated camouflage to cover both of them and the dragon, interfering with possible soul power tracking as much as possible. The three and the dragon did not linger, plunging into the mist swamp ahead, which was shrouded in light gray mist and resembled the mouth of a giant beast. Once they entered the swamp area, the environment immediately became completely different. Underfoot, it was no longer solid ground but mud of varying depths. Some places looked like grassland, but one step could cause you to sink directly to your knees. The poisonous miasma permeating the air was significantly thicker, appearing light gray-green and carrying a pungent, fishy sweet smell. An ordinary person would likely become dizzy after just one breath. Visibility was severely obstructed. Even with Lin Yan's eyesight, he could only see a range of a few dozen meters, and further away were rolling thick fog and shadowy, twisted tree silhouettes. All kinds of strange insect chirps and frog croaks came from all directions, adding a few more layers of mystery. Xiao Yixian walked at the very front. Her emerald eyes seemed to glow in the gray-green poisonous miasma, and her keen perception of toxicity allowed her to avoid areas where the poisonous miasma was particularly dense in advance, and identify which were seemingly harmless but actually lethal poisonous mud pools. The ancient soul scale in her hand became the best guide, as the dark gold patterns on the scale were even clearer in the poisonous miasma environment, continuously pointing in one direction. Lin Yan stayed in the middle to support, his soul perception fully expanded, vigilant against dangers that might strike from the mud, fog, or even the canopy above. The ancient soul scale in his hand also continuously emitted resonance, echoing the scale in Xiao Yixian's hand ahead. Kai Rong followed at the end, its huge body moving with extreme difficulty in the mud, leaving deep pits with every step. The damp and cold poisonous miasma made it very uncomfortable, and its wounds sent waves of numb itching and stinging pain due to poison gas erosion, but it still gritted its teeth and persisted, with magma energy slowly circulating in its body, dispelling the invading cold and damp poison gas. The deeper they went, the more bizarre the swamp became. They encountered man-eating flowers that could spit venom, strange fish with long, sharp teeth that lurked in the mud and suddenly erupted, and swarms of bloodthirsty poisonous mosquitoes. But in the face of Lin Yan's flames with the power deliberately controlled to avoid causing a large fire and exposing their position, and Xiao Yixian's deadly poison, these dangers were resolved without any real peril. However, the warning between Lin Yan's brows never disappeared. Instead, as time passed, that cold feeling of being locked on became increasingly clear. The pursuers behind them did not seem to be completely blocked by the complex environment and were still steadily closing the distance. This won't do. If this continues, we will be caught sooner or later. Lin Yan's mind raced. He had to find a way to get rid of them, or create obstacles. His gaze fell on those areas in the swamp that were particularly dark in color, had particularly dense poisonous miasma, and even had faint energy fluctuations. Perhaps. Xiao Yixian, can you find an area where the poisonous miasma and mud are particularly active, and where there might even be natural poisonous barriers or traps? The more dangerous, the better, Lin Yan asked. Xiao Yixian sensed for a moment and pointed to the front left. Over there, the poisonous miasma is dark purple, and there's a slight sense of an energy vortex in the mud. It might be a poison gas eruption point or a lair hiding a powerful poisonous creature. Good, let's go there, quickly. The three changed direction and rushed toward the dark purple poisonous miasma area. The closer they got, the stronger the corrosiveness of the poisonous miasma became. Even Lin Yan needed to use Doqi to protect his body, and Kai Rong had to cover its entire body with magma energy, consuming a huge amount. In the swamp, some strange, half-plant, half-animal vines also began to appear, attempting to entangle them, all of which were burned off by Lin Yan using the green lotus core flame. Finally, they reached the core of this area. It was a small mud pool that constantly bubbled with dark purple bubbles, and in the center of the mud pool was a small vortex, emitting heart-palpitating toxic energy fluctuations. The surrounding poisonous miasma was so thick it could not be dispersed, and visibility was almost completely obscured. Kai Rong, aim at the center of the mud pool and use your strongest magma breath to blast it. Then we will immediately detour and advance at full speed in the direction indicated by the scales. Lin Yan ordered. Although Kai Rong was puzzled, it executed the order without hesitation. It took a deep breath, disregarding its injuries and consumption, and condensed all the remaining magma energy in its body. A magma breath, more condensed and dark red in color than before, slammed into the vortex at the center of the dark purple mud pool. Boom! A violent explosion rang out. The magma mixed with the highly toxic mud, instantly triggering a terrifying chain reaction. The dark purple poison gas shot into the sky like a volcanic eruption and quickly diffused, mixing with the surrounding poisonous miasma to form an energy field with a larger range, stronger toxicity, and extreme chaos. Something in the mud pool seemed to have been startled, letting out a sharp hiss, and the mud in the entire area began to churn violently. Go! Lin Yan shouted in a low voice, taking Xiao Yixian and Kai Rong, detouring around this eruption area, heading in the direction indicated by the ancient soul scale, increasing their speed to the limit, and plunging into the deeper mist without looking back. Behind them, the terrifying poison gas eruption and chaotic energy field temporarily blocked sight and perception. But Lin Yan knew that this could only delay them for a moment. He could feel that the cold sense of being locked on, after a brief chaos, had once again tenaciously penetrated part of the poisonous miasma and clung onto them again, and, this time, it seemed to carry a trace of anger and even sharper killing intent. Chapter 36. Away through the dead zone, an unexpected gain. Giant stones stood like a forest, and the poisonous miasma was like a sea. Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian found themselves in this dead zone like stone maze. Around them was a silent terror, every direction seemed to point toward a deeper trap of death. Behind them, the churning gray poisonous miasma was quietly consuming the path they had come from at a pace that was neither fast nor slow, but utterly despairing. The energy field here has been completely disrupted, Lin Yan said, frowning slightly. He spread out his powerful soul perception, but it was like a clay ox entering the sea, torn to shreds by the distorted force field emitted by the stone formation itself and the ubiquitous laws of the poisonous miasma. He could only barely sense the range of a few jong around him. He tried to activate the ancient soul scale in his hand, but the faint resonance that originally pointed toward the depths of the swamp had now become chaotic and erratic, losing its clear guidance. It's not just vision and perception, even the sensing of this scale has been blocked. This stone formation isn't just naturally formed, I fear it has been artificially altered, specifically designed to trap and kill intruders. Xiao Yixian's expression was also exceptionally grave. She closed her eyes and fully circulated the 7-colored poison manual, attempting to communicate on a deeper level with the poisonous miasma in the surrounding environment, which was so thick it refused to disperse. However, the poisonous miasma here did not seem to welcome her as an outsider. Instead, it faintly carried a sense of repulsion and hostility, as if guarding something and preventing anything from approaching. Poison power can resist the erosion of the poisonous miasma, but it is very difficult to perceive its flow and find its patterns, she said, opening her eyes with a flash of frustration in her emerald eyes. The source of these poisonous miasma is very likely in the center of the stone formation, but they are not spreading uniformly. It's more like they are being controlled by some kind of power, deliberately creating these dead ends with no way out. Time ticked away, second by second, and an invisible pressure weighed on their hearts like a boulder. Chiron lay prone on the ground, growling uneasily. The lava energy on its body was greatly suppressed here, making even breathing difficult. We cannot just sit here and wait for death, Lin Yan said, his eyes sharpening as he scanned the surrounding giant stones, which appeared chaotic yet faintly revealed some kind of pattern. Since perception and the scale's guidance have failed, we will use the most primitive method. He walked to the nearest giant stone and reached out to touch its surface. It was ice cold and rough to the touch, and the stone was incredibly hard. Its surface was covered with traces of wind erosion from the passage of time and some unrecognizable, twisted patterns that seemed naturally formed. He slowly injected a trace of doqi, but the doqi was like a drop of water falling into a desert, instantly absorbed by the giant stone with no reaction. System, scan the current stone formation structure, establish a model of energy flow and spatial distortion, and deduce the possible locations of the exit. Lin Yan issued the command in his heart. Relying solely on manpower to crack a natural maze of this level combined with restrictions was nothing short of a pipe dream. He had to rely on the system's computing power. Command confirmed. Starting full spectrum scan. High intensity composite interference field detected. Establishing preliminary model. Analyzing energy flow. Warning. Periodic. Poison miasma loss pulse detected. Model construction is severely interfered with. Deduction speed reduced by 87%. Estimated time for complete analysis. 24 hours and 37 minutes. 24 hours. The speed at which the poisonous miasma was consuming everything would not wait for them that long. Prioritize analyzing the pattern of the poisonous miasma pulses in the resonance points of the stone formation's energy nodes. Find the relatively safe path in the shortest time. Lin Yan immediately adjusted his strategy. He did not seek a complete solution, only a glimmer of survival. Task replanned. Analyzing poisonous miasma pulses. Pattern discovered. A weak pulse every 49 breaths, a strong pulse every 360 breaths. During the strong pulse, the stone formation's energy nodes will experience a brief disturbance of about 0.3 breaths. Marking disturbed nodes, deducing in combination with the geometric structure of the stone formation, generating 3 potential, temporary passages. Duration, none exceed 5 breaths. Risk level, high. Passage endpoint, unknown. 3 passages that could only last less than 5 breaths, and the endpoints were unknown. This was practically gambling, but they had no other choice. Xiao Yixian, be prepared to follow me closely and act according to my commands. Lin Yan said in a deep voice, his gaze fixed on the location of the first disturbed node marked by the system in his mind. It was about 30 steps to their left front, in a gap between 2 giant stones that was so narrow it was almost non-existent. Xiao Yixian took a deep breath and circulated the poison power in her body to the extreme. A great purple light faintly appeared on the surface of her body, as she prepared to deal with any sudden impact of the poisonous miasma at any time. Chiron also braced itself, shrinking its body, a capability it had initially mastered after reaching the 5th rank, and followed closely behind. Time seemed to be stretched out. Lin Yan counted silently in his heart, raising his soul perception to the limit, capturing the signs of the arrival of that extremely brief strong pulse that only appeared every 360 breaths. It was coming. Now, 30 steps to the left front, the gap. Go. Lin Yan let out a low shout, and his figure shot toward the marked gap like an arrow released from a string. Explosive step was activated at full power, fast as lightning. Xiao Yixian and Chiron did not hesitate in the slightest and followed closely behind. The moment they rushed into the gap, the great poisonous miasma filling the surroundings suddenly rolled violently, as if stirred by an invisible hand, emitting a low whistle. The energy nodes in the stone formation erupted with blinding light, and the sense of spatial distortion reached its peak, making one feel dizzy. Chi, chi, chi. On the surface of the giant stones on both sides of the gap, those twisted patterns seemed to come alive, spitting out even denser gray-black poisonous gas, attempting to erode and consume them. Xiao Yixian let out a sharp cry and waved her hands. The great purple poison power transformed into a rotating shield of light, forcibly blocking and neutralizing these invading poisonous gases. Lin Yan caused the void-swallowing flame to appear in his palm, and the pitch-black flame silently burned any energy turbulence that dared to approach. The gap was narrow, allowing only one person to pass sideways, and the interior was not a straight line but incredibly tortuous. The 3 were like dancing on the tip of a knife, rushing forward at the fastest speed within the limited time of less than 5 breaths. 3 breaths. A fork in the road appeared ahead. 4 breaths. Based on the direction instantly calculated by the system, Lin Yan chose the right side without hesitation. 4.5 breaths. The area ahead suddenly opened up. They rushed out of that deadly gap and landed in a relatively spacious stone chamber, about a few jong in circumference. Almost at the same time they landed, the gap behind them suddenly closed, and the giant stones on both sides merged silently, as if they had never separated. And that intense poisonous miasma pulse and energy disturbance also quickly subsided. The first passage, success. Although it was only a few dozen steps, it felt as if they had experienced a life and death battle. All 3 were breathing slightly panting, and Xiao Yixian's face was even paler. Clearly, the previous confrontation of poison power had consumed a lot. There was no time to rest, and Lin Yan immediately sized up this unexpectedly discovered stone chamber. The stone chamber was not large and was circular. Weak daylight shone through the gaps in the rocks at the top, illuminating the scene inside. In the center of the stone chamber, there was actually a small, crude altar built of blue-gray stones. On the altar, there was nothing but thick dust. But what attracted Lin Yan's gaze was a totem on the surface of the altar, outlined with some kind of dark red pigment that looked like dried blood. It was extremely crude yet exuded an aura of wild, primitive ferocity. It was a twisted human figure, hands held high, as if praying or summoning, surrounded by patterns of poisonous insects and twisted plants. This is a totem of the ancient people sacrificing to the poisonous miasma. Xiao Yixian walked closer, carefully identifying it, surprise appearing in her eyes. Looking at this style and the degree of wear, I fear it has been here for thousands of years. Could this stone formation have been built by some ancient tribe that worshipped the poisonous miasma? Lin Yan also approached to observe, his soul perception carefully sweeping over every inch of the altar. Apart from the dust in the totem, the altar itself had no energy fluctuations or mechanisms. But he always felt that this altar appearing in a temporary safe point in the core area of the stone formation was by no means accidental. System, scan the altar and the surrounding stone walls, and look for hidden information or energy residues. Scanning. The material of the altar is ordinary blue rock. The totem pigment contains trace amounts of the activated ancient biological blood and mineral components. The stone wall structure is dense. Anomaly discovered. 3 inches directly below the altar, there is a faint spatial wrinkle and traces of residual energy seals, which are of the same origin as the current stone formation's energy field but are more ancient and stable. It is suspected to be a small independent space entrance or a storage node. The seal has experienced an extremely weak leakage due to the long passage of time and the periodic disturbances in the stone formation's energy. An entrance to an independent space. A storage node. Lin Yan's eyes lit up. He crouched down, pressed his palm onto the cold stone surface of the altar, and circulated his doji. At the same time, he attempted to draw on a trace of the ancient soul power originating from the ancestor of 10,000 scales within the pure corrosion soul seal between his eyebrows, as well as the devouring characteristics of the void-swallowing flame, slowly permeating toward that faint spatial wrinkle beneath the altar. There was no reaction. He tried again, using the ancient soul scale in his hand to touch the altar's totem. The moment the scale touched the totem, the dark gold patterns on it lit up slightly, and the altar seemed to vibrate gently, but it quickly returned to calm. The sense of leakage from the spatial wrinkle remained weak, unable to be opened. It requires a specific key or method. Lin Yan pondered. His gaze fell once again on the crude totem. Poisonous insects, twisted plants, the praying human figure, a tribe that worshipped the poisonous miasma. What would their key be? His gaze slowly shifted to Xiao Yixian. Xiao Yixian was stunned by his look, then immediately understood his meaning. She bit her lip, stepped forward, extended her right hand, and forced out a drop of poisonous blood from her fingertip that contained the essence of the calamity poison body, colored deep purple, almost black. She did not hesitate in the slightest and gently dripped this drop of poisonous blood onto the chest position of the praying human figure, totem on the altar. The poisonous blood dripped down and was not absorbed by the blue rock. Instead, it spread rapidly along the lines of the totem like a living thing. The dark red ancient totem was instantly stained with a layer of eerie purple black. The entire altar shook violently. A strange energy fluctuation, far more ancient, more primitive, and filled with potent poison and vitality than the previous energy of the stone formation, erupted from beneath the altar with a boom. That faint spatial wrinkle was instantly torn apart and expanded, forming an oval-shaped light gate that allowed only one person to pass through, rotating with great purple light. Inside the light gate, a small space could be vaguely seen, and it seemed that some things were piled up inside. Success. The essence of the poisonous blood of the calamity poison body was indeed the key to opening this ancient seal. I will go in and take a look first, Lin Yan said, making a prompt decision. He signaled Xiao Yixian and Kai Rong to stand guard, while he himself stepped into the light gate. The scene before his eyes changed, and he found himself in an independent stone chamber about 10 jong square. The four walls of the stone chamber were smooth and carved with poisonous insect and miasma wood totems similar to those on the altar outside, but more complex and precise. The air in the room was dry and filled with a faint, strange scent mixed with the fragrance of medicine and humus, which was not unpleasant. In the center of the stone chamber, 3 items were neatly placed. On the far left was a half-person high basket woven from some kind of deep purple vine, filled with dried medicinal herbs of strange colors and peculiar shapes. Lin Yan gave it a rough scan and recognized that several of them were rare poisonous herbs and spiritual medicines that had long gone extinct in the outside world and were only recorded in ancient books. They were at least 500 years old, and a few even faintly emitted the misty precious light that only 1,000-year-old spiritual medicines possessed. The value was immeasurable. In the middle was an ancient, gray-brown stone box. There were no patterns on the surface of the stone box, only a sense of heavy simplicity. Lin Yan carefully opened it, and inside lay a scroll made of unknown animal skin, as well as 3 pills the size of dragon eyes, completely emerald green and translucent, emitting an alluring medicinal fragrance and boundless life energy. The scroll was heavy to the touch, and the animal skin was incredibly tough. It was covered with dense content recorded using ancient characters and diagrams. Although Lin Yan did not recognize all the characters, combined with the diagrams and the parts he could identify, he could be certain that this was a secret manual specifically expounding on the combination of the poison path and the medicine path, utilizing various highly poisonous substances to refine pills, and even using poison to refine the body and stimulate potential. Its sophistication and depth were likely far beyond the basic chapters of the 7-colored poison manual in Xiao Yixian's hands. As for the 3 emerald green pills, although Lin Yan did not know their specific names, judging by the energy fluctuations and medicinal fragrance they emitted, they were definitely precious pills of an extremely high grade for healing, detoxifying, or even increasing cultivation. They were at least above the 4th grade. On the far right was a staff about 3 feet long, pitch black, neither metal nor wood, with a strange gem the size of a pigeon egg embedded at the top, constantly changing with 7-colored luster. The staff was heavy and cold to the touch, and it faintly transmitted fluctuations that echoed with the surrounding laws of the poisonous miasma. This was clearly a precious tool of a not low grade, specifically used for controlling the poisonous miasma or casting poison-type spells. The inherited treasure of an ancient poison path tribe. Lin Yan was shocked in his heart. This unexpected gain was practically tailor-made for Xiao Yixian. With these medicinal herbs, the poison path's secret manual, precious pills, and the staff, her path of cultivation would be smooth, and her strength could be improved by leaps and bounds in a short time. He quickly put all 3 items into his storage ring and was just about to leave when his gaze swept over the bottom of the empty stone box and suddenly paused. On the bottom of the stone box, there seemed to be a few lines of extremely tiny handwriting, almost blending into the color of the stone. Lin Yan leaned in to carefully identify it. It was a language even more ancient than that on the scroll, twisted like worms, but he could vaguely read its meaning through his soul perception. Quote, Inheritor of the poison body of later generations, having obtained my legacy, must inherit my will, break the 10,000 poison miasma eye, take the heart of source poison, resolve the 1,000-year predicament of this place, remember, beneath the miasma eye, there's a different world, it concerns the secret of the 9 keys. 10,000 poison miasma eye, heart of source poison, resolve the 1,000-year predicament of this place, and it concerns the secret of the 9 keys. Lin Yan's pupils constricted. This amount of information was too huge. Could the core of the mist swamp, the so-called 10,000 poison miasma eye, not only be a dead zone, but also hide the secret of another key poison attribute related to the ancient soul scale? Perhaps it was even another layout left behind by that ancestor of 10,000 scales. He suddenly recalled that the direction the ancient soul scale pointed to was exactly deeper into the swamp, and it faintly overlapped with the location of this 10,000 poison miasma eye. So, that stone formation was not only a dead zone, but also one of the entrances guarding the way to the 10,000 poison miasma eye and deeper secrets. And they, by some twist of fate, had actually opened this forgotten shortcut through Xiao Yixian's poisonous blood. Lin Yan took a deep breath, firmly memorized the handwriting at the bottom of the stone box, and turned to step out of the light gate. Outside, Xiao Yixian and Kai Rong were waiting nervously. Seeing Lin Yan appear safely, they both breathed a sigh of relief. What is inside? Xiao Yixian asked. Lin Yan looked at her, took out the items from his storage ring one by one, and said in a deep voice, it is your great opportunity. But at the same time, it also points out our next path. We must go to the core of the 10,000 poison miasma eye. He paused, pointing to the other side of the stone chamber, where, under the illumination of the altar's light, a deep, winding passage, half hidden by vines and loose stones, vaguely appeared. From the passage, what came out was no longer grey poisonous miasma, but a more intense, more violent, and colorful aura of potent poison. That path, I fear, leads directly to the depths of the miasma eye. Go, or not go. Chapter 37, Refining Essence, Shadow Tracking. Only after the rock layers completely sealed the passage behind them, cutting off that bloody slaughterhouse in the suffocating, terrifying aura of Moluo, did Lin Yan dare to slightly relax his tense nerves. Cold sweat had long since soaked his back, sticking to his lichen gray robe and bringing a cold, clammy sensation. He leaned his back against the rough rock wall, panting heavily, while the pure corrosion soul seal between his brows still retained the cold aftertaste of its long-distance collision with Moluo's destructive soul power, as if it had just been fished out of an ice cellar. Ahead, Chiron was traveling through the labyrinthine rock crevices and underground dark rivers at top speed. Its massive body seemed somewhat clumsy at this moment, but the instinct for survival and loyalty to its master drove it to ignore its injuries and push its speed to the limit. Every movement of its body tugged at the gaping wounds on its frame, and dark red blood mixed into the cold water of the dark river, blooming into a faint bloody hue. Yet, it only emitted suppressed low growls from its throat, without a shred of complaint. Xiao Yixian was likewise lying weakly on Chiron's back armor, her face pale as paper. Having forcefully unleashed the poison-tide soul burial to block Moluo's strike just moments ago, she had nearly exhausted the poison power she had recently refined and had yet to stabilize, which had further strained her soul origin. At this moment, her poison power was depleted, her meridians throbbed with pain, and she felt waves of dizziness deep within her soul. Yet she still held on, gripping several ancient soul scales tightly in her hand, attempting to use the faint resonance of these scales to guide Chiron along the most hidden and energetically chaotic escape route. Deathly silence and oppression shrouded the group as they fled for their lives. Only the rushing sound of the dark river, Chiron's heavy panting, and the eerie hissing of unknown creatures occasionally drifting in from outside the rock crevices formed the only background noise in this underground world. They didn't know how long they had been traveling through the darkness, but only when Lin Yan felt the heart-burning seal on his back and the pure corrosion soul seal between his brows go completely silent, no longer transmitting any sensation of being tracked, did Chiron's speed slowly decrease. Ahead appeared a dry cave, its natural dome formed by the roots of giant ferns. Within the cave, faint phosphorescence flickered, providing illumination that was better than nothing. Here, should be safe for now. Lin Yan spoke in a hoarse voice, his soul perception sweeping slowly inside and outside the cave like a tired tentacle, confirming there were no other living beings or obvious energy traps. Chiron, stop and rest. Chiron, as if granted amnesty, let out a low whimper and carefully moved into the cave, curling up its massive body and immediately beginning to lick the most severe wounds on its body, while greedily absorbing the thin but peaceful earth attribute energy within the cave. It naturally repelled water and yin environments, and traveling through the underground dark river earlier had only exacerbated its injuries. Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian slid down from its back, each finding a relatively flat rock to sit on. The exhaustion of surviving a disaster surged over them like a tide, and both felt a wave of powerlessness. Heal your injuries first and restore your state. Lin Yan did not waste time on sentiment or lingering fear, directly taking out various healing and energy recovery pills he had previously refined or looted from his storage ring, distributing them to Xiao Yixian and Chiron. He also swallowed several, sat cross-legged, and sank his consciousness into his body. First, he examined his soul state. Although the long-distance collision of soul power with Moluo had been brief, the other party's pure, destructive soul power was of extremely high quality, bringing significant shock and minor damage to his soul. The pure corrosion soul seal spontaneously emitted cold soul power, slowly repairing this damage while also bringing waves of chill. Lin Yan guided the seed flame of void-devouring flame, like the most meticulous craftsman, carefully wrapping and assimilating the soul power emitted by the soul seal, transforming it into soul nourishment that was easier to absorb and devoid of negative emotions. This process was slow and mentally draining, but he had to do it, otherwise, the erosion of the soul seal would subtly affect his mind. Next was his doji and body. After continuous high-intensity fighting and fleeing, his doji was nearly exhausted, many meridians throbbed with pain, and his internal organs also suffered slight concussive injuries. The improved energy-storing pills and the life force of the living spirit flame worked in tandem, slowly nourishing his damaged body. Xiao Yixian was also silently regulating her breath. She did not immediately replenish her poison power, but instead followed the secret methods recorded in the 7-colored poison manual to first stabilize her damaged soul and comb through her chaotic meridians. Only then did she carefully take a small jade bottle from her storage ring, which contained the diluted Schwamming true water she had collected earlier. She dripped out a small drop and slowly refined it with her own poison power, using its extremely yin and pure energy to wash and temper her poison origin, which had become somewhat unstable due to excessive consumption. Chiron's recovery was much simpler and more brutal. It lay prone on the ground, and in the crevices of its lava carapace, dark red light flowed slowly, flickering like breathing. The weak earth and fire attribute energy in the cave was slowly absorbed by it, and in combination with the power of the pills, it repaired its damaged scales and bones. Its 3 pairs of lava light wings were now dim and lusterless, hanging limply, clearly severely damaged, and it would be difficult to recover its flight ability in the short term. Time passed in the silence of healing. They didn't know how much time had passed, but the phosphorescent light at the top of the cave seemed to brighten a fraction, indicating that night had likely passed in the outside world. Lin Yan was the first to open his eyes, the divine light in his pupils restrained, his aura having largely recovered, though the pale soul seal between his brows remained conspicuous, emitting a faint cold sensation. He looked at Xiao Yixian, whose complexion had also become much reddier, and a faint glimmer of interwoven gray purple and pale blue light flowed around her body. Her aura was more solid and calm than before, obviously indicating that under the pressure of the crisis, her control over the fusion of her poison power and Schwamming true water had improved. How do you feel? Lin Yan asked softly. Much better. Xiao Yixian opened her jade green eyes, a trace of lingering fear flashing in them. That person was too terrifying. His power felt somewhat similar to the soul seal, but also completely different. It was more violent and pure, born only for destruction. Recalling the scene where Moluo annihilated the mountain wall with a wave of his hand, she still felt a chill down her spine. Lin Yan nodded, his expression grave. He must be a true high-ranking member of the Hall of Souls, his strength at least dozong, perhaps even higher. Furthermore, his sensing of my soul seal is extremely keen. I'm afraid he is not merely a common Hall of Souls deacon or protector. He recalled Moluo's words, found you, the bearer of the key. The key, did it refer to the ancient soul scale? Or the pure corrosion soul seal itself? Or perhaps both? System, bring up information regarding Moluo and similar high-ranking Hall of Souls members. Lin Yan asked in his mind. Searching, based on absorbed soul fragments, 3-star Doling UGU, staff wielder, etc. and mission log analysis. Name, Moluo codename. Affiliation, Hall of Souls, suspected to be a deputy hall master of a branch hall or a high-ranking elder level executive. Estimated strength, high-level dozong, 4-star or above, specific level unknown. Characteristics, masters highly condensed, destructive soul power, suspected to be related to the core inheritance of the Hall of Souls or a forbidden experiment. Possesses extremely strong perception of and covetousness for pure corrosion soul power, ancestor of 10,000 scales related auras. Threat level, extremely high, cannot be fought at the current stage. Suggestion, completely conceal your tracks, improve your strength, and avoid direct conflict. High-level dozong, just as expected. Lin Yan's heart felt heavy. With his current strength, he could maneuver against a Do Ling, would need to risk his life against a Do Wang, and against a Do Zong, he would only be able to flee, without even the qualification to maneuver. Escaping this time was purely a stroke of luck, and it was also thanks to Kai Rong's familiarity with the underground environment and its desperate efforts to cover their retreat. We must leave this area as soon as possible, his search net will only tighten. Lin Yan made his judgment. Xiao Yixian, what is the direction of the ancient soul scale now? Xiao Yixian took out those scales, sensed them carefully for a moment, and pointed in one direction. This piece has the strongest resonance, still pointing northeast, but it seems the specific location has shifted slightly, as if it is in a very damp, energetically heavy area. Damp, energetically heavy, it is very likely the mist swamp. Lin Yan compared it to the map in his mind. The environment there is complex, filled with poisonous miasma, which is favorable for us to hide our tracks and suitable for you to cultivate and search for clues regarding poison attribute ancient soul scales. But at the same time, the danger level will also be much higher. With you here, I am not afraid. Xiao Yixian looked at him, her tone calm and firm. Lin Yan nodded slightly and looked at Kai Rong, whose aura had stabilized quite a bit, but whose light wings remained withered. Kai Rong, can your injuries and state support long-distance travel and potential high-intensity combat? Kai Rong raised its massive head, the fighting spirit in its dark golden vertical pupils still undimmed, and transmitted mentally, Master, rest assured. These minor injuries are nothing. As long as we don't encounter that kind of monster again, this little dragon will definitely protect Master and the young lady. It's just these wings. It moved its dim light wings behind it with some annoyance. I'm afraid I won't be able to fly for a short while. Traveling will be slower. No matter, safety first. Lin Yan thought for a moment, and took from his storage ring the core of the degraded purifying soul flame that he had stripped from the staff wielder's skull and had been preliminarily devoured and purified by the void devouring flame, now transformed into a fingernail size, strange crystal interwoven with pale and pitch black patterns, as well as several medicinal materials obtained from the Hall of Souls black robed man and a decent quality third tier water attribute magic core. Try absorbing these things. They might be helpful for repairing your injuries or even purifying your fire attribute. Kai Rong's lava earth fire tended to be violent. If it could integrate a trace of the purified, pure corrosion characteristic, it might be able to improve the condensation of its flames and its resistance to special energies like soul power. Kai Rong gratefully took them and immediately began to absorb them. Although the energy in the pale crystal had been purified, it still carried a trace of chill, which clashed with its lava earth fire attribute. However, under its careful guidance and the suppression of its own bloodline power, it actually began to slowly fuse, and the color of the flames on its body faintly shifted toward a dark red with a golden hue, its aura also becoming more restrained. Seeing Kai Rong enter a cultivation state, Lin Yan also closed his eyes again. But this time, his target was the small lump of purifying soul flame origin essence, left behind after the purifying erosion fire seed, that had been lying quietly in the system inventory completely dissipated, as well as the information regarding soul power usage from the ancient flood dragon's remnant inheritance. He carefully guided out a wisp of purifying soul flame origin, using its cold and pure soul power as a guide, and combined with the devouring and transformation characteristics of the void devouring flame, began to attempt to temper and purify his own soul power, which had become slightly unstable after a rapid surge. At the same time, he digested the techniques regarding the control of yin, power, soul defense, and attacks from the ancient flood dragon inheritance. This knowledge faintly echoed with a pure corrosion soul seal, giving him more enlightenment on the use of the soul seal's power. Gradually, the light of the soul seal between his brows became a little softer, and the cold sensation it emitted was no longer so bone-piercing, instead possessing more of a sense of being able to be retracted and released at will. He felt his control over his soul power was slowly and firmly improving. Ding, detected that the host's soul power purity has increased, and initial control over the pure corrosion soul seal has strengthened. Triggered phase mission, soul seal initial understanding. Mission content, further refine the purifying soul flame origin, analyze the fragments of pure corrosion law contained within the soul seal, and master at least one Do technique for soul power application of Zon rank or higher. Mission reward, soul realm stabilized to the early stage of the spirit realm, unlock partial application characteristics of purifying soul flame, e.g., soul flame armor, pure corrosion night points times 1000. Long-term main mission, ancient secret, progress update, obtained key clue, attention and pursuit from Hall of Souls high-ranking member, Moluok suggests accelerating the progress of collecting ancient soul scale. The mission had arrived, and the goal was even clearer. Improve strength, unravel the secret of the soul seal, collect ancient soul scales, and at the same time, evade the pursuit of the Hall of Souls high-ranking member. Several hours later, Kai Rong was the first to wake up. Although the injuries on its body had not completely healed, its aura was much more vigorous, and a trace of pale gold faintly showed through the dark red flames, clearly having gained quite a bit. Xiao Yixian also finished regulating her breath, her poison power restored to 7 or 8% and becoming more condensed. Depart, target, mist swamp. Lin Yan stood up, his gaze cast toward the northeast. The ancient soul scale in his hand, pointing northeast, was slightly hot. The two people and one dragon set out on their journey again. This time, they were even more cautious. Lin Yan contracted his soul perception to the limit, covering only 100 jong radius around them, while using the aura of the void swallowing flame to conceal his own fluctuations to the maximum extent. Xiao Yixian also occasionally sprinkled some medicinal powder to interfere with sense and energy traces. Kai Rong, relying on its familiarity with the terrain, chose paths that were desolate, difficult to traverse but hidden as much as possible. 2 days later, they finally walked out of the complex underground rock layer area and returned to the surface. Before them was a mountain forest where the terrain gradually lowered and the vegetation became increasingly dense and damp, and the air began to fill with a faint, gray-white mist carrying the scent of decay and sweetness. The edge of the mist swamp was already in sight. However, just the moment before they were about to step into this strange and dangerous place, at the edge of Lin Yan's soul perception, he abruptly captured a wisp of extremely obscure soul power fluctuation that caused the soul seal between his brows to suddenly turn cold. That fluctuation did not come from the swamp ahead, but from behind them to the side, a seemingly calm forest clearing several miles away. The fluctuation flashed and disappeared, as fast as an illusion, but Lin Yan would absolutely not misidentify it. What it contained was precisely the destructive soul power, or that was of the same origin as Moluo's, but much weaker and more hidden. Stop, Lin Yan shouted in a low voice, his eyes sharp as knives, looking toward that seemingly harmless forest land. There is an ambush. The people from the Hall of Souls have actually managed to get in front of them. Or is it that Moluo used some means beyond their understanding and had long since anticipated their route? Chapter 38, Lost in the Mist and Miasma, Strange Shadows in the Poison Swamp. 3 days had passed since they left the bloody battlefield. Lin Yan, Xiao Yixian, and Kai Rong traveled through the dense mountains and forests in the northwestern part of the Magical Beast Mountain Range, deliberately avoiding all traces of human activity in the territories of known high-level magical beasts. Kai Rong was the most severely injured. The wound on its hind leg, eroded by the ghost fire of the Hall of Souls, was difficult to heal in a short time, even with its tough physique and fire attribute regenerative abilities. The wound was surrounded by persistent, chilling soul power, making every step heavy. It spent most of its time in the special contract space, a temporary resting place opened via the soul contract Lin Yan provided, only being released briefly when scouting or guarding was necessary. Lin Yan's condition was the most complex. The pale, pure corrosion soul seal, between his brows followed him like a shadow, constantly emitting a chilling aura that eroded and reshaped the essence of his soul. The benefit was that his perception and control of soul power improved at an astonishing speed, with his total soul strength stabilizing at the peak of the mortal realm, even faintly touching the mysterious threshold of the spirit realm. The drawback was that his emotions were suppressed to an extremely low level, and his thinking became abnormally calm, even cold. His perspective on things often went straight to the most essential interests and risks. The warm, human part of him seemed to be covered by a layer of ice. He had to constantly use the seed flame of void devouring flame as a core to construct a soul defense line to resist the erosion of the soul seal, which consumed a great deal of his mental energy. The skull that had been forcibly broken off and had devoured the pale seed flame had been completely decomposed by the void swallowing flame. The complex soul power within it was purified and absorbed, while the remaining material turned to ash. The fragmented information obtained from the memory of the staff-wielding envoy, combined with the guidance of the ancient soul scale, made him more wary of the layout of the Hall of Souls and the secret of the ancestor of 10,000 scales. Xiao Yixian's changes were relatively positive. After being tempered by the Xuanming true water and absorbing part of the resonance aura of the ancient soul scale, her calamity poison body presented a strange new balance. The great purple poison power was fused with a trace of calm, icy blue luster, not only becoming more powerful but also easier to control, with much less of the previous violence and risk of backlash. Her perception and ability to control poisons advanced by leaps and bounds. The few rare poisonous herbs she collected along the way were all carefully processed using the secret methods recorded in the 7-colored poison manual, refining them into more concentrated poison liquid or powder, which she then stored away. The way the two of them interacted was also quietly changing. Due to the influence of the soul seal, Lin Yan spoke less and his emotions were more muted, but all his decisions and actions carried a convincing precision and reliability. Xiao Yixian had become more proactive and resilient, striving to improve herself. She was no longer just an object that needed protection, but a partner who could provide poison support, early warnings, and even participate in tactical planning. A silent tacit understanding, based on sharing life and death and having a common goal, flowed between them. At this moment, they stood on a relatively high mountain ridge, and the scene in front of them made even the calm Lin Yan frown slightly. Ahead, there were no longer rolling green mountains or dense forests, but a boundless, gloomy land shrouded in gray-white thick fog. The fog was so thick it was almost tangible, slowly rolling and flowing, swallowing everything. One could only vaguely see some twisted, strange shadows of dead black trees and murky, greenish petals nearby. A moist, rotting scent wafted through the air, mixed with a sweet, fishy smell and a faint odor of sulfur. Inhaling it into the lungs brought a faint sense of dizziness and nausea. It was deathly silent. Apart from the occasional creepy rustling and low gurgling sounds coming from unknown places, there was no other sound. The mist swamp had arrived. The resonance guidance of the ancient soul scale clearly pointed to the depths of this land of death. Lin Yan could feel that the ancient soul scale in his storage ring corresponding to poison or similar attributes had become unusually active at this moment. The scale was slightly hot, and the frequency of the dark gold patterns flashing had obviously increased. The fog here is poisonous, and it is a complex, highly toxic mixture of various miasmas, decaying poisonous gases, and the emanations from underground poison glands. Xiao Yixian took a deep breath, her emerald eyes glowing slightly as she carefully discerned the toxic substances in the air. Anyone below the level of a Dou master would likely die within moments of inhaling it. Even a Douling expert, without special resistance, would be chronically eroded and experience obstructed Dou qi circulation if they stayed for a long time. However, she looked at Lin Yan, her eyes filled with a hint of eagerness. For my poison body, the environment here is simply a natural training ground and supply station. She could feel the poison power in her body spontaneously absorbing and assimilating the trace amounts of similar toxic substances in the air, growing slowly and steadily. Do not be careless. Lin Yan's voice was calm and waveless. Poison is only one factor. Vision is obstructed, perception is distorted, the terrain is unknown, and various poisonous insects and beasts, or even stranger things, may be lurking beneath the swamp. People from the Hall of Souls may also have tracked us here. He took out 2 specially made, miasma clearing pills, from his storage ring, took one himself, and handed the other to Xiao Yixian. These were refined using several anti-poison herbs combined with the aura of the living spirit flame. While they could not provide complete immunity to the intense poison here, they could significantly increase resistance and help maintain clarity. Stay close to me, use soul perception to scout the path, and watch your step. Lin Yan was the first to step into the gray-white thick fog. Xiao Yixian followed closely behind, with a wisp of gray-blue poison power lingering on her fingertips, which could serve as a warning and could also be used to fight poison with poison when necessary. Once inside the mist and miasma, the light immediately dimmed, as if stepping from daylight into dusk. Visibility was less than 10 zhong. Beyond that, it was a blur of gray and white. Underfoot was soft, damp ground mixed with rotting leaves and mud. Every step had to be carefully tested to avoid falling into hidden quagmires. The sweet, fishy, and rotting smell in the air became more intense, trying to penetrate the nasal cavity from every angle. Lin Yan retracted his soul perception to about 20 zhong in front of him, forming a relatively clear detection circle. But even with his soul strength at the peak of the mortal realm, he was significantly interfered within this strange mist and miasma. The scenes he perceived were twisted and blurred, as if separated by a layer of frosted glass. More troublesome was that the mist and miasma themselves seemed to have a weak erosive and paralyzing effect on soul power. Xiao Yixian, relying on the special sensitivity of her poison body, was exceptionally keen on the changes in poison in the surrounding environment. She would whisper reminders from time to time. The petal to the front left has an abnormal concentration of poison glands. There might be a nest of poisonous insects. The dead tree on the right, the bark is secreting paralytic mucus. Watch your step. This patch of moss is highly toxic and shows signs of sliding. The two cooperated, moving slowly and cautiously along the edge of the perilous swamp. On the way, they encountered several waves of attacks. A swarm of fist-sized, emerald green, rot poison mosquitoes, with sharp mouthparts was turned into ice sculptures and fell after Xiao Yixian scattered a handful of mixed poison powder. A second rank, withered wood poison viper, lurking in the muddy water had its soul directly scorched by a precise strike of Lin Yan's fallen heart flame, invisible heart fire causing it to twitch and die. Another time, they almost stepped into a trap that looked solid but was actually a poison swamp mud monster. In disguise, fortunately, Lin Yan's soul perception detected a weak life fluctuation below, giving them an early warning to avoid it. These attacks were not high in intensity, but they were endless and drained their energy. What was more disturbing was that as they went deeper, the color of the mist and miasma began to change subtly, gradually tinged with imperceptible traces of light purple from the gray-white. The sweet, fishy smell in the air became heavier, even beginning to interfere with the normal circulation of Doqi. Something is wrong. Xiao Yixian stopped, her expression grave. This purple mist is not naturally formed. It is mixed with some kind of high-level poison power residue that was artificially refined or at least guided. It is very similar to the purple luo smoke mentioned in the 7-colored poison manual, but more overbearing and complex. Lin Yan sensed it too. This light purple mist had a stronger interference with the soul, and it faintly produced a weak repulsive reaction to the pure corrosion soul seal between his brows, as if two high-level powers from different sources were invisibly probing each other. Just as the two were vigilantly observing their surroundings, a strange, intermittent sound, like metal grinding or a painful moan, suddenly came from deep within the mist ahead. At the same time, the resonance of the ancient soul scale suddenly became intense, and the scale even began to tremble slightly. It's ahead. Lin Yan's eyes narrowed, signaling Xiao Yixian to increase her vigilance. Following the sound and the guidance of the resonance, the two carefully moved forward. Passing through an exceptionally dense area of purple mist where one could barely see their own hand, the scene ahead suddenly, or rather, eerily became a bit clearer. The fog became thinner here, revealing a relatively open clearing covered with black mud and pale white bones. In the center of the clearing stood several crooked, toppled dark cyan stone pillars carved with twisted, strange patterns. They were clearly man-made, but had long since fallen into disrepair, covered in moss and traces of corrosion. In the center surrounded by the stone pillars was a mud swamp about 3 jong in diameter, constantly bubbling with dark purple bubbles. In the swamp, half of a huge, pale white skeleton of an unknown creature was submerged, along with some rusted metal fragments. The strange metal grinding sound and painful moaning came precisely from the depths of the mud swamp, intermittent, as if something was trapped underneath and struggling. What made Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian's hearts tighten even more was that a few broken, black robe fragments were scattered on the edge of the mud swamp. On the fabric, the ghost face embroidery unique to the Hall of Souls was faintly visible. Moreover, the fragments were still new and had not been completely corroded by the mud swamp. People from the Hall of Souls had been here, and it was very likely that a battle or an accident had occurred. Lin Yan squatted down and picked up a piece of the black robe fragment. His fingertips brushed over the extremely weak, chilling soul power aura remaining on it. It was from the same source as the previous staff-wielding envoy, but more complex and chaotic, as if it had been contaminated by some strange power from this place. There is something under the mud swamp. Xiao Yixian pointed at the bubbling swamp, her face pale. My poison power sense is very intense, death energy and resentment below, mixed with high toxicity, and also a trace of living aura. Very weak, very painful. The resonance of the ancient soul scale reached its peak at this moment, the scale burning hot, pointing directly at the center of the strange mud swamp. Could it be that the next ancient soul scale, or the entrance to the relevant ruins, is under this mud swamp? Lin Yan stared at the churning dark purple mud, his eyes sharp as knives. The people from the Hall of Souls had clearly discovered this place too, but it looked like they had either failed or paid a heavy price. Was the sound coming from the mud swamp a trap, a guardian, or a cry for help from a survivor of the Hall of Souls? Just as Lin Yan was weighing whether to risk investigating, a sudden change occurred. The pure corrosion soul seal between his brows began to beat violently without warning. A cold and urgent thought was transmitted from it, not directed at the mud swamp, but abruptly turning toward the direction they had come from. At the same time, the system's urgent alarm sounded in his mind. Warning, an ultra-high-level threat detected approaching at high speed. Direction, southwest, distance, less than 5 li. Energy characteristics, fire attribute violent, space attribute tearing, soul power attribute pure and chilling. Comprehensive judgment, same source as the previous strong enemy that broke the ground in the cavern, and even stronger. Target locked, host, estimated time of contact, 30 breaths. Lin Yan's expression changed drastically. It was that top expert from the Hall of Souls who had broken the earth vein above the cavern earlier. He had actually tracked them here so quickly. Was it because of the heart-burning seal? Or was it the fluctuation of the pure corrosion soul seal that exposed them? Xiao Yixian, find a place to hide immediately. Conceal all your aura. Lin Yan whispered sharply, while completely withdrawing the severely injured Kai Rong into the depths of the contract space. He himself fully operated the void swallowing flame, enveloping his soul in the pure corrosion soul seal, attempting to suppress their fluctuations to the lowest level. Xiao Yixian also sensed the terrifying pressure that made her soul freeze, which was approaching rapidly. Her face turned deathly pale, and she dashed without hesitation toward a gap nearby covered by a huge dead tree and rocks. 30 breaths passed in the blink of an eye. In the southwestern sky, the gray-white mist and miasma were roughly torn apart by an invisible, immense force. A figure shrouded in pitch black, churning thick fog appeared on the edge of the clearing as if teleporting. He did not fully reveal his figure, but the pair of eyes projecting from the black fog, burning with pale white flames, like a gaze from the 9 netherworlds, instantly fell on the spot where Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian, who had just finished hiding and whose auras had almost vanished, had previously stood. The terrifying pressure descended like a tangible mountain. The surrounding air stagnated, the fog was pushed away, and the ground sank slightly. Even the strange mud swamp temporarily stopped bubbling. The existence in the black fog seemed to let out a puzzled, huh. He had clearly sensed the familiar, craved, pure corrosion, soul power fluctuation in the key, aura, so why, upon arriving close, did it become so weak and flickering, as if it had merged into the strange swamp environment? His gaze slowly swept across the clearing, finally fixing on the strange, bubbling mud swamp and the black robe fragments of the Hall of Souls left on its edge. Trash, a hoarse, low voice that sounded like grinding sand came from the black fog, carrying a hint of disdain and anger. Clearly, he recognized these as the traces of the Hall of Souls, subordinates, and did not care at all about their failure or death. His attention seemed to be drawn by the strange sounds coming from the mud swamp and the complex energy fluctuations contained within. The aura mixed with high toxicity, death energy, resentment, and a trace of weak, same source, sensing piqued his interest. An interesting place, it seems. There's also the scent of a key. The figure in the black fog slowly took a step toward the mud swamp. Hiding in the crevices of the dead wood and rocks, Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian held their breath, their heartbeats like beating drums. They were in close proximity to that terrifying existence. And at this moment, the sounds in the strange mud swamp suddenly stopped, as if it had sensed the approach of a more terrifying existence, and it fell into a deathly silence. Chapter 39, Duel of the Dual Flames, Return of the Spectres. The grotto was deep, and the passage wound downwards, as if leading to the 9 netherworlds. Moss emitting a faint phosphorescent glow clung to the stone walls, barely illuminating the path ahead. The air was damp and cold, permeated by a strange, faint odor that was a mixture of decay and some peculiar, sweet fragrance. Lin Yan's soul perception extended forward like tentacles, vigilant against every dark corner. As they went deeper, the surrounding scenery began to change. The stone walls were no longer rough rock but had gradually become smooth, even taking on a dull, ink green color. They felt icy to the touch, with a texture that was neither quite jade nor stone. Scattered, strangely shaped bones began to appear on the ground. Most were small, appearing to be from certain venomous insects or snakes, but the color of the bones also showed an eerie ink green or purple black, clearly indicating they had been highly venomous while alive. The poison energy here, it's so pure, and so ancient, Xiao Yixian said softly, following behind Lin Yan. The Wo poison body energy within her was exceptionally active, as if she had returned home, greedily absorbing the free-floating, weak, yet high-essence poison attribute energy in the air. Her eyes shimmered with a faint, emerald green ghostly light in the darkness, and her perception of poisonous entities was magnified several times over here. Be careful ahead, the poison gas concentration is increasing, and there's the aura of living things. It's very faint, but carries intense hostility. Lin Yan nodded, signaling Xiao Yixian to hold back. The pure corrosion soul seal between his brows lit up slightly, and a cold, pure soul force mixed with his perception spread outwards. Sure enough, at the corner of the passage ahead, he saw over a dozen strange flying insects, each the size of a fist, their bodies jade green, with transparent thin wings on their backs and sharp mouthparts. They were quietly clinging to the ink green stone wall, almost blending in with the surrounding environment. Their bodies contained astonishingly potent poison energy and carried a chaotic fluctuation of soul force. They were clearly a variant species of venomous insect bred by the special environment of this place. Jade soul poison cicadas. Be careful, their poison can corrode the soul. Lin Yan recognized this rare venomous insect, which had a vague record in the 7-colored poison manual. He flicked his finger, and a wisp of fallen hard flame, seed flame energy, compressed to the extreme, shot out silently. It did not directly attack the insects' bodies but instead seeped into the interior of the stone wall where they were perched. SS's. The formless heart flame directly triggered a faint heart flame tremor within the stone wall. Those jade soul poison cicadas might not have been sensitive to physical attacks, but they had no resistance against this tremor that struck directly at the origin of the soul. Instantly, like dumplings being dropped into a pot, they fell from the stone wall one after another. After twitching a few times, they ceased all movement, and the poison souls within them quickly dissipated. Having easily dealt with this batch of obstructing venomous insects, the two continued forward. At the end of the passage, the space suddenly opened up into a massive natural grotto. In the center of the grotto, there was a small pool of water barely a jong in radius. The pool water was not clear but presented a viscous, deep purple color that bubbled constantly, emitting a thick, cloying, sweet-smelling, highly poisonous aura, as well as an incomparably pure, cold energy. Growing on the edge of the pool were a few strange plants, one shaped like a lingsy mushroom but entirely pitch black, with silver veins on its surface, ink jade poison lingsy, the other looked like a twisted vine, blooming with a palm-sized flower that shimmered with 7 colors, so beautiful it was heart-stopping, 7 absolute poison immortal flower. Both of these were top-tier, poison attribute natural treasures recorded in the 7-colored poison manual that were rare and hard to come by. They possessed immeasurable value for cultivating poison arts and tempering a poison body. Seeing them, Xiao Yixian's breathing quickened slightly. However, the existence guarding these treasures was certainly no easy opponent. Right there in the deep purple poison pool, a black shadow resembling a piece of deadwood slowly surfaced. It was a strange snake, only the thickness of an arm but 2 jong long, its entire body covered in fine, purple-black scales, with a small fleshy lump growing on the top of its head. Its pair of vertical pupils were pure silver, cold and ruthless, tightly locking onto the intruders. Most peculiarly, within its slightly open snake maw, 2 flames of different colors were faintly dancing, a cluster of dark purple on the left, emitting toxic and cold fluctuations originating from the same source as the pool water, and a cluster of ghastly white on the right, which was shockingly similar to the flame in the skull of the Hall of Souls staff wielder from before, yet even purer and more condensed. A degraded purifying soul flame. A two-headed. No, it's a dual flame nether serpent. Lin Yan's eyes narrowed. This type of magical beast was extremely rare, naturally capable of controlling 2 flames with vastly different properties. One was a yin poisonous flame, the other a yin soul flame. They complemented each other, and their power was eerie and unpredictable. Judging by its aura, it was at least a tier 5 low-level magical beast equivalent to a low-star Do Wong. Moreover, it held the geographical advantage. That poison pool was clearly the source of its power. Hiss. The dual flame nether serpent let out a threatening hiss. As its snake tongue flickered, the dark purple and ghastly white flames intertwined, causing the surrounding air to become distorted and icy, while carrying a strong sense of soul corrosion. Lin Yan, the poison lingsy and the poison flower it guards are crucial to me. Xiao Yixian said in a low voice. In her hand, she had already gripped several specially made poison needles. The tips shimmered with an eerie light of intertwined dark blue and grey purple. These were the Shuangming poison soul needles, which fused the cold energy of Shuangming true water with her Wo poison body energy. I'll take the lead in attacking. You wait for an opportunity to retrieve the treasures. Watch out for its white flame. It causes damage to the soul. Lin Yan quickly formulated a tactic. Facing a tier 5 magical beast in an unfavorable environment, they had to finish the battle quickly. With a thought, he simultaneously activated the green lotus core flame and the fallen heart flame seed flame within his body. A sensation of intense heat and formless burning rose from his body, countering the surrounding cold poison gas. The void-swallowing flame seed flame lay in wait within his meridians, ready to deal with that eerie white soul flame. Kai Rong, prepare to provide support. Block the cave entrance to prevent it from escaping or causing a larger commotion. Lin Yan notified Kai Rong outside through their soul contract. Understood, master, Kai Rong responded. Without any wasted words, the dual flame nether serpent launched the first attack. Its long, slender body shot out violently, fast as lightning. At the same time, it opened its snake maw wide, spraying a viscous stream of dark purple poison fire from the left side, while shooting a ghastly white bolt of soul flame from the right. The poison fire stream carried a yin poison that corroded everything, while the soul flame bolt aimed straight for the soul. It was incredibly insidious. Welcome, Lin Yan shouted in a low voice. The explosive step exploded beneath his feet, and his figure advanced instead of retreating. He sidestepped the sharpest trajectory of the soul flame bolt, while at the same time, the green and red firelight on his right fist surged violently, and he punched toward that stream of dark purple poison fire. 8 extremities collapse. Green lotus break. The scorching fist force of the green lotus core flame collided violently with the cold poison fire, producing a sharp, sizzling sound. The poison fire was forcibly dispersed by more than half, but the escaping poison gas still caused a numbing sensation in Lin Yan's arm. At the same time, that ghastly white soul flame bolt had arrived before him. The pure corrosion soul seal between Lin Yan's brows lit up automatically, and a thin layer of pale halo emerged. The soul flame bolt struck the halo and melted away like ice and snow. Most of it was absorbed and converted by the soul seal, while the remainder was forcibly shattered by Lin Yan with his powerful soul force. A flash of shock and suspicion crossed the dual flame nether serpent's eyes. Clearly, it had not expected its dual flame attack to be neutralized so easily, especially the white soul flame, which it itself was somewhat wary of, yet it had had such minimal effect on the opponent. Just at the moment when its old strength was exhausted and new strength had not yet arisen, Xiao Yixian moved. Her figure drifted toward the edge of the poison pool like a ghost, her target aimed straight at the 7 absolute poison immortal flower. At the same time, several Schwamming poison soul needles shot silently toward the dual flame nether serpent's vital spot and eyes. The Schwamming cold energy and potent poison attached to the needles were something even it dared not underestimate. Hiss! The nether serpent hissed in anger. Its long, slender tail whipped toward Xiao Yixian like a steel lash, while its body twisted to avoid the lethal poison needles. But Xiao Yixian's footwork was agile, and she dodged the snake's tail by a hair's breadth, her fingertips already touching the stem of the poison immortal flower. The nether serpent was completely enraged. Abandoning Lin Yan, it turned and lunged at Xiao Yixian. Opening both mouths simultaneously, an even denser dark purple poison fire and ghastly white soul fire gushed out, sealing off all of Xiao Yixian's retreat paths. Your opponent is me. How could Lin Yan let it have its way? A black light flashed in his eyes, and the void-swallowing flame seed flame, which had been gathering momentum all along, was finally unleashed. A thread of fire, thin as a hair but pitch black and deep to the extreme, arrived later yet struck first. As if possessing a life of its own, it precisely cut into the weak junction between the dark purple poison fire and the ghastly white soul fire. Void-swallowing flame, devour. There was no earth-shattering explosion, only a heart-palpitating sense of annihilation. Wherever the pitch-black thread of fire passed, whether it was the yin poisonous fire or the yin soul fire, it was as if erased by an eraser, disappearing silently by a segment. That characteristic of devouring all things made the dual flame nether serpent feel a fear that originated from its very soul. Its offensive faltered. Xiao Yixian seized this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, plucked the 7 absolute poison immortal flower, stored it in a specially made jade box, and retreated rapidly. Got it, let's go. Xiao Yixian shouted clearly. Lin Yan did not linger in battle either. The void-swallowing flame seed flame was released and retracted immediately, consuming quite a bit of energy. He pulled Xiao Yixian up, activated explosive step at full power, and retreated rapidly toward the way they had come. Although the ink jade poison Lingzi was also a treasure, there was no time to collect it now. Hiss! Seeing the treasure snatched away, the dual flame nether serpent let out a hiss of extreme rage. The entire poison pool boiled, its long, slender body shot out violently, pursuing relentlessly. At the same time, the small fleshy lump on the top of its head suddenly split open, and a drop of purple black essence blood, emitting terrifying fluctuations of energy, seeped out and merged into the flames it spat out. The next instant, the dark purple and ghastly white flames actually began to fuse, transforming into a strange purple-white flame. Its temperature was not high, but it carried a coldness that could freeze the soul, a potent poison that corroded all things, and a chaotic, frantic soul force erosion. Its power instantly skyrocketed several times over. Fused flame, not good. Lin Yan's expression changed slightly. This beast was desperate. He suddenly pushed Xiao Yixian toward the passage behind him, turned around himself, and took a deep breath. The green lotus core flame, the fallen heart flame, and a wisp of origin soul force from the pure corrosion soul seal between his brows were forcibly gathered into his right palm. 3 forces with vastly different properties, yet all incomparably powerful, conflicted and collided within the flesh and meridians of his palm, bringing a tearing, excruciating pain. But his eyes were cold, staring fixedly at the purple-white fused flame shooting toward him. 3 flame, return to Ruin's palm. He pushed out a palm. Green, red, and white lights twisted and intertwined, transforming into a chaotic colored energy palm print. It was neither scorching nor cold, but a strange fluctuation that seemed capable of decomposing all things and returning them to their origin, meeting the purple-white flame. Boom! The 2 terrifying forces collided violently in the narrow passage. There were no scorching shockwaves, only silent energy annihilation and a terrifying soul storm. The ink-green jade on the stone walls of the passage was instantly covered in cracks, and large pieces fell off. Lin Yan let out a muffled groan, blood spilling from the corner of his mouth, as he was pushed sliding backward by the recoil force, crashing into Xiao Yixian, who had rushed back to provide support. The purple-white fused flame was also forcibly dispersed by more than half by the 3-colored palm print. The remaining power also caused the dual flame nether serpent to hiss and retreat, with charred marks appearing on its fine scales. It had clearly been injured as well. Go! Lin Yan suppressed his churning blood and qi, and without hesitation, rushed into the passage they had come from with Xiao Yixian. Kai Rong had already been waiting outside to provide support. Seeing the 2 rush out, it immediately spewed magma to force back the nether serpent that had chased to the cave entrance, then carried the 2 and plunged headlong into the thick poison fog, fleeing for their lives toward the deeper parts of the swamp. The dual flame nether serpent chased out of the cave entrance, letting out an unwilling hiss toward the poison fog, but in the end, it did not pursue into the depths of the even denser and more chaotic poison miasma, which made even it feel uncomfortable. Only after fleeing for dozens of miles and confirming that the dual flame nether serpent was not pursuing did the 2 breathe a sigh of relief and land in a relatively dry pile of rubble. Lin Yan sat cross-legged to regulate his breathing. The energy within his body was rampaging, and his soul throbbed with pain from forcibly activating the 3 forces. Xiao Yixian carefully examined the 7 absolute poison immortal flower they had obtained, a look of joy appearing on her face. However, before they could even catch their breath, the heart-burning seal on Lin Yan's back and the pure corrosion soul seal between his brows simultaneously transmitted an unusual disturbance. The heart-burning seal throbbed with searing heat, while the pure corrosion soul seal emitted a cold warning fluctuation. Something is approaching rapidly. Many, and they carry a cold soul aura similar to those people from the Hall of Souls from before, but it's more heterogeneous, more chaotic, and more insane. Lin Yan opened his eyes abruptly and looked toward the direction they had come from, his expression becoming exceptionally ugly. Xiao Yixian also sensed it. It was an extremely uncomfortable, cold aura that felt as if countless resentful souls had gathered together. It was surging from the direction of the grotto, washing over the swamp like a tide, and flooding toward their side. The quantity, hundreds, thousands. Was it brought here by that 2-headed strange snake? Or, before Xiao Yixian could finish her sentence, her expression changed abruptly. In the distance, within the thick poison fog, countless pairs of ghastly green eyes, devoid of any reason and filled only with madness and hunger, flickered and emerged. Accompanied by the teeth-grinding sound of bones rubbing against each other and low soul howls, twisted, semi-transparent black shadows, or those attached to decaying skeletons, were crawling and floating out from the depths of the poison fog, forming a terrifying tide of the undead, slowly surrounding them toward their location. These monsters were neither souls nor beasts. They had traces of the Hall of Souls, arts remaining on them, yet they seemed to have undergone unknown mutations after being eroded by the potent poison of this place for a long time. Their target was clear. It was Lin Yan, who carried the pure corrosion soul seal. Chapter 40. Poisonous miasma of the mist swamp. The scale leads astray. The further northeast they went, the lower the terrain became. Towering ancient trees were gradually replaced by low, strangely shaped hydrophytes. The ground became soft and muddy, and the air was filled with an indelible scent, a mixture of rot and a strange, sweet, fishy smell. Thin, multicolored mists began to linger among the trees, obscuring the view, and even the sunlight became thin and distorted. The mist swamp is one of the dangerous places in the northwest region of the magical beast mountain range that makes people change color at the mere mention of it. The poisonous miasma that never dissipates all year round, the bottomless mud pits, and the countless poisonous insects and strange beasts lurking within form a natural maze of death. Rarely do mercenaries or adventurers dare to venture deep into this place, and the markings on the map for this area are the most vague, with only large blank spaces and skull marks representing danger. Lin Yan and his group were now standing at the edge of the swamp. The soil under their feet had become soft and slippery, sinking slightly when stepped on, making a squelching sound. The view ahead was blocked by the multicolored mist, and they could only see scenes within a few dozen zhong, twisted, gnarled dead trees, stagnant pools floating with green duckweed, and the occasional flash of brightly colored poisonous insects or slippery figures. The poisonous miasma permeating the air was a fatal threat to ordinary people. Inhaling it through the mouth and nose would erode the lungs and paralyze the nerves. But for Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian, it was a different experience. The heavenly flame circulated within Lin Yan's body, especially the auras of the green lotus core flame and the void swallowing flame, which had a natural purifying and resistant effect against these ordinary poisonous miasmas. He felt no discomfort while breathing. Instead, he could sense that these miasmas contained various complex yet rich elemental energies, especially wood, water, and poison attributes. Xiao Yixian's experience was even more direct. Her emerald eyes appeared exceptionally bright in the multicolored mist. With every breath, it seemed as if she could inhale the essence of the toxins in the poisonous miasma into her body, strand by strand. After the transformation by her poison body's origin, it turned into pure poison power, nourishing herself. She could even distinguish the subtle differences in the miasma in different areas. That pale purple patch had hallucinogenic and paralyzing effects, that dark green patch had stronger corrosiveness, and that pink patch contained toxins that induced aphrodisiac and chaotic effects. The 7-colored poison manual automatically operated in her mind, analyzing and recording these natural poison repositories. This place is simply a paradise for poison attribute cultivators. Xiao Yixian sighed softly, her tone carrying a hint of complexity. The more dangerous the environment, the more beneficial it was for her growth, but the invisible murderous intent hidden in this dead silence also made her instinctively vigilant. Kai Rong appeared somewhat restless. Its massive body was quite inconvenient on the wet and soft muddy ground, and it hated the ubiquitous humidity and water puddles even more. Although the dense poisonous miasma in the air was blocked by its formidable physique and fire attribute Doqi, that damp and sticky feeling made it feel uncomfortable all over, and the luster of the lava shell on its back had dimmed somewhat. Master, this place is unfavorable for me. My aura is too obvious, and it is easy to attract unnecessary trouble. Kai Rong sent a thought through the soul contract. You stay on the periphery to provide support, do not go deep. Lin Yan nodded in agreement. Kai Rong's attributes were indeed incompatible with this place, and forcing it to enter might instead make it a target. He had Kai Rong lurk and rest under a relatively dry rock wall at the edge of the swamp, while also guarding the rear. Only Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian remained. Lin Yan took out the ancient soul scale with the strongest resonance and held it in his palm. The scale was slightly hot at the moment, and the dark gold patterns on it flickered, transmitting a clear and continuous sense of attraction, pointing directly to the depths of the swamp. He tried to use his soul perception to scout the path, but found that the multicolored poisonous miasma here also had a certain interference and weakening effect on soul power, compressing his perception range to about 100 zhong. Follow the guidance of the scale, and be careful of your feet and surroundings. Lin Yan said in a deep voice, focusing his soul perception on the front and his feet. The pale pure corrosion soul seal between his eyebrows appeared exceptionally striking in the poisonous miasma environment, emitting a faint cold light that silently purified and dispersed the approaching poisonous miasma, clearing a small area. Xiao Yixian nodded, following closely by Lin Yan's side, holding several specially made antidote pills and poison needles in her hand, her eyes sharply scanning the surroundings. Her poison power perception was actually more effective here than Lin Yan's soul perception, capable of detecting poisonous creatures lurking in the mud, dead wood, or mist in advance. The two of them, one in front and one behind, cautiously stepped into the multicolored mist. Underfoot was deep, uneven mud, and they occasionally needed to use floating rotten wood or protruding tree roots to jump forward. The surroundings were terrifyingly silent, with only the squelching sound of boots sinking into the mud and the occasional hair-raising hissing or rustling sounds coming from unknown places. The multicolored mist flowed, and the light and shadows changed. Sometimes it felt as if one could see twisted human or beast figures, but upon closer inspection, there was nothing, adding a touch of eeriness. After traveling for about an hour, except for occasionally encountering a few blind low-level poisonous insects and snakes easily dealt with or dispersed by Xiao Yixian, they did not encounter any major danger. However, the vigilance in Lin Yan's heart did not diminish in the slightest. The terror of this swamp often did not lie in those visible poisonous insects and ferocious beasts, but in the invisible environmental murder's intent. Sure enough, when they passed through a seemingly calm depression covered with thick rotting leaves, a sudden change occurred. The ground under Lin Yan, who was walking in front, suddenly gave way. The seemingly solid layer of rotting leaves collapsed instantly, revealing a bottomless mud pit below, churning with dark green bubbles. A powerful suction force came, trying to drag him into the abyss. Careful, Lin Yan's reaction was extremely fast. Explosive step was activated instantly, Doqi exploded under his feet, and his body forcibly shifted several feet to the side. He grabbed an exposed, slippery tree root nearby with one hand, hanging on the edge of the mud pit in a precarious manner. As for the place where he had just stood, the rotting leaves and soil were quickly swallowed and disappeared into the dark green mud. Quicksand poison swamp, Xiao Yixian exclaimed, hurriedly stepping forward, throwing out a tough vine to wrap around Lin Yan's arm, and pulling him up. The two of them looked at the mud pit again and saw that in the dark green mud, there were faintly visible pale white bones and beast corpses that had not completely rotted, floating and sinking, emitting an even stronger stench and highly toxic aura. If he had fallen in just now, I'm afraid even Doqi protection wouldn't have lasted long. Having bypassed this poison swamp without any major incidents, the guidance of the ancient soul scale led them to an even denser, almost pitch black, deep purple mist area. The poisonous miasma here was so dark that it turned black, with strong hallucinogenic and soul-eroding characteristics. Lin Yan had to increase the output of the pure corrosion soul seal to maintain a purification field, with a diameter of less than 3 feet around him. Xiao Yixian also needed to exert her full effort to operate the poison manual to resist the pervasive mental interference in the miasma. And right in the center of this deep purple mist area, they saw the target guided by the ancient soul scale. It was not some magnificent ruin, but a low altar completely built from various pale white bones. The altar was not large, about a zhong in radius, built entirely from the bones of an unknown creature. The surface of the bones was covered with dense small holes, as if eaten hollow by something. In the center of the altar stood a crooked, gray-black pillar that looked like a human spine. At the top of the pillar, it was not enshrined with any idol, but stuck with an irregularly shaped, dark-colored, almost black-purple scale. The scale was similar in size to the ancient soul scale in Lin Yan's hand, but the color was deeper and gloomier. The surface was covered with twisted, purple-black patterns that bulged like blood vessels, emitting an extremely uncomfortable aura mixed with highly toxic, deathly silence, and crazy resentment. This was exactly the suspected poison attribute scale guided by the ancient soul scale. However, the state of this scale was clearly extremely abnormal. It was not like the water or yin attribute ones that were accompanied by the ancient flood dragon's remnant and swimming true water, full of ancient majesty and aura of inheritance. The one before them was more like a cursed, evil object full of malice and ominousness. The ground around the altar was barren, the soil was a weird purple-black, and more small bone fragments of various colors were scattered about. The poisonous miasma permeating the air seemed to be continuously radiating from this altar as the center. This scale, is it polluted? Or, is it the core of some kind of poison condensed or sealed? Xiao Yixian's expression was solemn. She could clearly feel that the poison power origin in her body had a very strong, contradictory reaction of both longing and extreme repulsion towards that black-purple scale. The longing was because the essence of poison contained in the scale was a supreme tonic for her. The repulsion was because the crazy resentment and deathly silence mixed in the scale were contrary to the control and vitality pursued by the poison manual, more like pure destruction and depravity. Lin Yan also frowned tightly. The ancient soul scale in his hand was no longer transmitting a peaceful attraction, but a rapid, even warning-like tremor. It was as if it was reminding him that the scale in front of him was extremely dangerous. System, scan the altar and the black-purple scale in front. Scanning, warning, high concentration, corrupted soul poison, force field detected. Target, black-purple scale, suspected ancient soul scale, poison attribute corrupted variant. Status analysis. This scale was once one of the origin scales of the ancestor of 10,000 scales, poison attribute, but it has suffered deep pollution and corruption by unknown forces. The poison, laws sealed inside have twisted and mutated, mixed with a large amount of crazy resentment, deathly soul power, and some kind of unknown curse. It has formed a corrupted poison source, continuously radiating and polluting the surrounding environment, generating myriad poison miasma. Danger level, high, contact or approaching may trigger, corrupted soul poison, erosion, polluting the soul and energy origin, and inducing madness. Forcibly collecting it may cause the poison source to erupt, rapidly expanding the scope of pollution. Suggestion, need to purify the corrupted part of the scale first, or find a safe isolation sealing method before attempting to collect it. Corrupted variant, unknown pollution. Lin Yan's heart sank. It seems that the acquisition of this second scale is much more troublesome and dangerous than expected. This is not just a place of inheritance or treasure, but more likely a huge source of pollution and a trap. Should we try to purify and collect it directly, or first explore the surroundings to look for clues? Xiao Yixian looked at Lin Yan. Although she longed for the poison origin in the scale, she also knew its danger. Lin Yan did not answer immediately. He scanned the surroundings of the altar with sharp eyes. Suddenly, he noticed that on the edge of the purple-black land behind the altar, there seemed to be a few inconspicuous traces of being stepped on. The traces were very faint, almost covered by the erosion of the poisonous miasma, but under the careful investigation of his soul perception, they still revealed clues. Those were not the footprints of beasts, but more like human footprints. Moreover, the traces were relatively new, no more than 3 or 5 days old. Someone has been here, and, very likely the target is also this corrupted poison scale. Lin Yan's heart instantly tightened. Was it people from the Hall of Souls? Or other forces? Or other existences hidden in this swamp? Don't act rashly for now, Lin Yan said in a low voice. Someone has been here before us. Let's explore the surroundings first to see if there are any other clues, and at the same time observe if there's anything else strange about this scale and altar. The two carefully bypassed the front of the altar and began to explore from the side and rear. Relying on powerful soul perception and poison power sensing, they soon discovered an abnormality in a pile of rocks covered by dense poisonous vines about 50 jong behind the altar. There was a hidden entrance that could only accommodate one person, cleverly covered by poisonous vines and small illusion-type arrays. If it weren't for Lin Yan's keen soul perception, it would have been almost impossible to discover. From inside the entrance, faint but extremely weak energy fluctuations were transmitted, which caused Lin Yan's soul seal between his eyebrows and the ancient soul scale in his hand to react simultaneously. That was an aura homologous to the ancient soul scale, but weaker and fresher. Is there someone inside? Or, is there another scale? Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian looked at each other, both seeing the shock and doubt in each other's eyes. Just as they were hesitating whether to enter the cave to investigate, a very slight, crack, sound, like porcelain shattering, suddenly came from inside the hidden entrance. Immediately following, a soul power fluctuation that was colder, more evil, and carried a certain greed and ecstasy than the one at the altar, suddenly erupted from the cave. The poisonous vines and illusion arrays covering the entrance shattered instantly. A figure shrouded in a tattered black robe, whose face could not be seen, but whose body was wrapped in dense black-purple poisonous mist and sickly green soul fire, rushed out from the cave like a ghost. In his hand, he was holding a palm-sized, yet emitting a faint green light, fragment that was somewhat similar in shape to the ancient soul scale, a broken bone fragment. The figure rushed out of the entrance and saw Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian not far away at the first glance, especially the ancient soul scale in Lin Yan's hand that was emitting resonant light. In the area of his face shrouded by poisonous mist, 2 points of scarlet light suddenly lit up, like a hungry wolf that had discovered a peerless treasure, emitting a hoarse and excited low roar. Ancient scale. Resonator, finally, found you. Offer up your scales and souls, and become the sacrifice for the resurrection of the myriad poison lord. Chapter 41. Winds rising and clouds gathering. News of Xiaoyan. The edge of the mist swamp was a transitional zone known as the rotten bone forest. The soil here was a sinister gray-black, and the air was permanently suffused with a faint, mixed odor of rotten sweet, cloying blood. Twisted, grotesque trees stood like struggling giants, their clawing branches draped with ragged moss and the webs of unknown insects. The ground was covered in a thick, soft, and slippery layer of fallen leaves. Stepping on it caused turbid, bubbling liquid to seep out. Yet, deep within this sinister place, which ordinary adventurers avoided like the plague, a hidden camp cleverly constructed from tough, iron bone wood, and a type of anti-corrosive vine had been quietly operating for over a month. The camp was situated between several enormous iron bone wood trees, forming a natural treehouse, several jong above the ground. It cleverly utilized the dense canopy and natural vines as camouflage. Unless one walked right up to it for a careful inspection, it was extremely difficult to detect. The interior of the camp was divided into 3 levels. The top level was an observation and lookout platform. The middle level was the quiet room, where Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian each cultivated, rested, and stored important supplies. The bottom level was the area for processing medicinal herbs, refining basic pills, and where Kai Rong temporarily resided. At this moment, in the middle, quiet room, Lin Yan sat cross-legged on a meditation cushion polished from a solid piece of warm jade obtained from the Yulan secret grotto. His eyes were slightly closed, his breathing long and steady, and the pale, pure corrosion soul seal between his brows had its light restrained, yet it vaguely emitted a deeper, colder fluctuation. Around him, the air slightly distorted, and one could faintly see faint halos of green, red, and black light circulating endlessly. This was the 3 sub-flames, the green lotus core flame, the fallen heart flame, and the void swallowing flame, undergoing the complex and dangerous simulation and fusion training under his precise control. After a month of dedicated cultivation and hunting on the edge of the rotten bone forest, Lin Yan's strength had undergone significant changes. The most intuitive change was his cultivation level. With the help of magic cores and medicinal herbs obtained from hunting swamp poison beasts and low-level magical beasts, supplemented by the refining of some earth fire spirit pulp, the last bit collected before leaving the lava cave, and the essence of swarming true water, his doji chi finally flowed naturally. On a stormy night, he successfully broke through the bottleneck and officially stepped into the ranks of a Do practitioner. Furthermore, because his foundation was incomparably solid and he had the tempering of the heavenly flames and the baptism of earth-bane energy, he stabilized at the peak of a 1-star Do practitioner in one fell swoop, and he was not far from the 2-star level. Secondly, there was his soul power. Although the fusion and control of the pure corrosion soul seal remained difficult in the cold, heavy burden persisted, thanks to the continuous devouring and conversion by the void swallowing flame, as well as the devouring and absorption of the soul of the Hall of Souls staff wielder. His soul power had completely stabilized at the peak of the mortal realm. He had even begun to touch upon the mysteries of micro-perception, greatly increasing the precision of his perception and control over energy. The cold side effects brought by the soul seal were also gradually reconciled by his powerful willpower and the vitality of the living spirit flame, no longer easily affecting his state of mind, but instead becoming a special combat aid, an extremely calm mindset and judgment. As for Do techniques, Explosive Step had long since reached the height of perfection and was even more formidable after his breakthrough to Do practitioner. He had completely mastered the first 3 levels of strength of the 8 extremities collapse, recorded in the remnant scroll, and its power had greatly increased when combined with his Do-chi. The most gratifying thing was that, through in-depth research into the characteristics of the 3 sub-flames and system assistants, he had finally successfully fused a trace of the characteristics of the Green Lotus Core Flame and the Fallen Heart Flame into the force-generating method of the 8 extremities collapse, creating a prototype of a self-created Do technique that suited him and had power far exceeding a Zon tier low-grade technique, Flame Heart Collapse. When this technique was unleashed, the overt force was as scorching as a volcanic eruption, and the covert force was invisibly burning the heart, causing damage to both Do-chi and the soul. Although not yet perfected, it already revealed powerful potential. Xiao Yixian's progress was equally remarkable. Living in this environment filled with poisonous miasma and venomous creatures everywhere, and with the refining assistance of the Shuaming True Water provided by Lin Yan, her cultivation of the 7-colored poison manual could be described as advancing by leaps and bounds. Not only was her poison power more pure and condensed, but the total amount had also grown steadily. Measured by Do-chi standards, she had also firmly stepped into the Do practitioner level. More importantly, her control over the calamity poison body had greatly increased. She was now able to retract and release poison power with relative ease, and refine several types of powerful mixed poisons and poison powders. She was no longer the girl of misfortune, who could only passively defend or lose control and go berserk. She even began to try integrating poison power into simple movement and attack techniques, creating several insidious and tricky poison palm and poison needle methods. Chiron's injuries had also mostly recovered under the pills provided by Lin Yan and his own recuperation. His strength was stable at the mid-stage of the 4th rank, equivalent to a low to mid-stage doling of humans, making him the most reliable guard and meat shield of the camp. Outside the camp, several hidden poison formations and early warning mechanisms had been jointly set up by Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian, so ordinary poisonous insects and magical beasts dared not approach easily. On this day, Lin Yan had just finished a round of heavenly flame fusion training and was regulating his breath. Xiao Yixian walked up from the lower level, holding a bamboo tube sealed with special resin, a look of solemnity on her face. Lin Yan, Chiron was patrolling 20 miles to the southwest just now and caught this. Xiao Yixian handed the bamboo tube to Lin Yan. Lin Yan took it and opened the bamboo tube. Inside was a rolled-up piece of rough animal hide paper, with a few lines of sloppy handwriting written in charcoal, seemingly hastily torn from some ledger or notebook. Although the handwriting was messy, the content made Lin Yan's pupils shrink. A shocking change in Jiama Holy City. Xiao Yan of the Xiao family suppressed all heroes at the Alchemist Convention, refined the peak 4th grade, 3-pattern Azure Spirit Pill, attracted Pill Lightning, shocked the entire audience, and won the championship of the Jiama Empire Alchemist Convention. However, after the competition, the Cloud Mist sect joined forces with the First Elders faction to launch an attack, accusing him of colluding with foreign enemies with conclusive evidence. Xiao family patriarch Xiao Zhan defended him, and the conflict escalated. Currently, Xiao Yan and his teacher, the mysterious Venerable Yao suspected, are trapped on Yanlan Mountain. The Imperial family and the Pill Tower have ambiguous attitudes, and the Jiama Empire is in turmoil. The Hall of Souls seems to have a hidden hand pushing this. Burned after reading. The information was very short and the source was unknown, possibly hastily recorded and lost by some intelligence peddler or mercenary who happened to pass by, but the news revealed was earth-shattering. Xiao Yan, Alchemist Convention, Cloud Mist sect attacks, Hall of Souls hidden hand. Lin Yan whispered the keywords, his eyes as sharp as knives. The plot had indeed advanced to this point, but it seemed that because of his own appearance and changes, Xiao Yan's strength improvement trajectory might be different. It had triggered some subtle changes. Xiao Yan actually refined a peak 4th grade pill at the Alchemist Convention. This was much stronger than the same period in the original work. But the crisis also came faster and more violently. The Cloud Mist sect and the First Elder colluded directly to attack. Even the Imperial family and the Pill Tower had ambiguous attitudes, and the Hall of Souls was pushing from behind. Xiao Yan was one of the few friends he acknowledged, and Venerable Yao had also given him guidance. In terms of reason and sentiment, he could not sit idly by. Moreover, the Cloud Mist sect and the Hall of Souls getting mixed up together was his enemy to begin with. However, he was now deep in the magical Beast Mountain range, more than 10,000 miles away from the Jiama Holy City. With his and Xiao Yixian's current strength and state, even if they rushed back, facing the Cloud Mist sect with Dozong Yanshan, the potentially existing Hall of Souls experts, at least Do Huang or even Dozong, and the Imperial family and Pill Tower with unclear attitudes, what could they do? Court death. Strength. Still not enough strength. Lin Yan clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. The joy of breaking through to Do practitioner was washed away by this sudden news, replaced by an intense sense of urgency and powerlessness. He needed to become stronger faster. He needed more power. Xiao Yixian also finished reading the content on the animal hide paper. Although she did not know much about Xiao Yan, she could see the severity of the situation from Lin Yan's reaction. Are we going back? She asked softly. Lin Yan was silent for a moment, then slowly shook his head. Going back now will not help, and may instead be walking into a trap. The goal of the Cloud Mist sect and the Hall of Souls may also include me. We need stronger power. We need power sufficient to change the situation. His gaze involuntarily turned to the corner of the quiet room, where several slightly warm, ancient soul scales, pointing in different directions, lay quietly. One of them pointed to an area deeper in the mist swamp, and the resonance had become clearer and stronger over the past month, sometimes even transmitting extremely faint, strange fluctuations related to the poison attribute. That was the guidance of the poison attribute ancient soul scale. Perhaps there was a fortuitous encounter hidden there that could allow Xiao Yixian's poison body to transform again, or allow his strength to skyrocket. Is your scale sensing anything stronger? Lin Yan asked. Xiao Yixian nodded and took out the ancient soul scale that belonged to her, which pointed to the depths of the swamp in resonance from her bosom. The scale was currently emitting a faint gray-purple halo, echoing faintly with the poison power in her body. Yes, and in the last 3 days, every midnight, it transmits a kind of very special calling sensation, as if something is waking up deep in the swamp, or waiting. Midnight, special calling. Lin Yan's heart moved. He thought of the Scale Lord ruins, mentioned in the system task, which was likely related to some kind of heaven and earth energy tied to a specific time. It seems we have to go deep into the swamp ahead of schedule. Lin Yan made a decision. That place may be our only chance to gain breakthrough power in a short time. Prepare, we will set off at dawn tomorrow, and Kai Rong will stay behind to guard the camp. Okay, a trace of anticipation and firmness also flashed in Xiao Yixian's eyes. Strength was also her desire. However, just as the two decided on the plan and were preparing to rest, Kai Rong, on the bottom level of the camp, suddenly transmitted an extremely urgent and terrified warning mental fluctuation through the soul contract. Master, it's bad. East, north, and west of the camp, a large number of unknown life forms are approaching quickly at the same time. The aura is cold and chaotic, the speed is extremely fast, at least hundreds. And, they seem to be fighting each other, but they are all rushing towards the direction of our camp. There are many, that are those troublesome poisonous creatures and mutated magical beasts in the swamp. They seem to have gone mad. What? Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian changed color at the same time. Hundreds of mad swamp poisonous creatures and mutated magical beasts rushing to the camp from 3 directions at the same time. This was definitely not a coincidence. Lin Yan instantly expanded his soul perception to the limit. Sure enough, within a few miles around the camp, he sensed dense life forms full of violent and chaotic auras, surging like a tide. Among them were many 3rd and 4th rank poisonous beasts equivalent to human doe masters or even great doe masters. They were indeed attacking and devouring each other, but the general direction of their advance was surprisingly consistent, pointing straight at the Iron Bone Wood camp where they were. What made Lin Yan's heart sink even more was that in that chaotic and violent torrent of auras, he keenly captured a trace of extremely obscure, yet making his pure corrosion soul seal produce a faint palpitation, traces of control and guidance. It was not a naturally formed beast tide. It was artificially induced, or driven here with a purpose by some higher level power or existence. It's aimed at us. Lin Yan's eyes were cold, and he instantly understood the key. Was it the Hall of Souls, or other forces coveting the ancient soul scales, or was it the defense or test mechanism of the poison, attribute ancient soul scale ruins deep in the mist swamp itself that had been triggered in advance? Regardless of which one it was, it meant a huge crisis at the moment. Prepare for battle. Hold the camp. Lin Yan shouted sharply, and at the same time quickly ordered Kai Rong, guard the entrance of the lower level, use flames to cover the perimeter of the camp, try to block them as much as possible. Xiao Yixian, have all poisonous drugs ready, focus on dealing with individuals who break through the flame defense line. Prioritize attacking weak points like eyes and wounds. Yes, Xiao Yixian and Kai Rong immediately responded and entered their combat positions. Lin Yan quickly checked the defensive poison formations and mechanisms around the camp, and reinforced several key nodes. He stood at the edge of the middle-level quiet room, overlooking the shadowy edge of the dense forest below, which was illuminated by the lava flames spewed by Kai Rong. In the darkness, countless scarlet, emerald, and dark blue eyes lit up, accompanied by hair-raising hisses, low roars, and the sound of carapace friction, approaching like a tide of death. A fishy wind hit their faces, and the poisonous miasma seemed to have thickened a bit. Lin Yan clenched his fists, the 3 sub-flames quietly boiling in his body, and the soul seal between his brows flickering with light. It seemed that if they wanted to explore the ruins safely, they must first survive this crazy bloody beast tide set off by an unknown hand. And this sudden attack also seemed to indicate that their journey to explore the ancient soul scale ruins would definitely not be peaceful. Chapter 42, Mist Swamp, deep within the poisonous miasma. The Mist Swamp lived up to its name. With the very first step into this region, Lin Yan felt a different kind of extreme peril, one completely unlike the lava cave. The sky was perpetually shrouded by a layer of grayish-white, viscous mist. Sunlight could not penetrate directly, only managing to cast a few bleak halos of light at midday. Beneath his feet was no longer solid ground, but a muddy swamp of varying depths, covered in thick layers of rotting leaves and slippery moss. The mud was a dark, ink green color. From time to time, viscous bubbles would rise and burst with a pop, releasing a nauseating stench of decay and pale green poisonous gas. The air was thick and heavy with an inseparable mixture of dampness and a sickly, cloying sweetness. It was not merely the scent of decay, it was mixed with the complex toxins released by countless poisonous plants, venomous insects, and the miasma itself. With every breath, it felt as if countless tiny, venomous insects were burrowing into his lungs, bringing waves of numbness and stinging pain. If not for the fact that practitioners could filter the air with do qi, an ordinary person stepping foot here would die from poison within half a day. The resonance of the ancient soul scale became exceptionally clear and restless here. The pitch-black scale in Lin Yan's hand grew slightly warm, pointing unwaveringly toward a certain direction deep within the swamp. Even the pure corrosion soul seal, deep within Lin Yan's soul seemed to feel a trace of faint excitement toward this extreme environment filled with negative energy, deadly poison, deathly aura, and miasma. The poison here is so complex, and also so abundant. Xiao Yixian stood beside Lin Yan, taking a deep breath, her emerald eyes shimmering with a strange luster in the dim light. Far from feeling uncomfortable, she felt as at ease as a fish in water. The calamity poison body power within her, like a glutton having sniffed out a feast, automatically accelerated its circulation, greedily absorbing and converting the free-floating toxic energy in the air, causing a sickly flush to rise to her pale cheeks. In this environment, the 7-colored poison manual was as if it had been injected with a catalyst. She didn't even need to deliberately cultivate, her poison power was steadily increasing, and her perception and control over toxins were becoming even keener. Kai Rong, however, appeared restless and uneasy. Its massive body was mired in the soft swamp, and every step was exceptionally difficult. Most fatally, the ubiquitous moisture and chilling toxins in the air were severely suppressing and eroding it, a fire attribute magical beast. The luster of its lava carapace grew dim, and the breath it exhaled carried painful white smoke. If not for its soul contract with Lin Yan, which allowed it to share a sliver of the void swallowing flame's resistance to negative energy, and Xiao Yixian's occasional use of her poison power to help disperse the cold toxins invading its body, it likely would have collapsed long ago. Kai Rong, your condition is too poor, it is not suitable for you to go deeper. Lin Yan stopped and frowned as he looked at the giant beast, whose aura was clearly wilting. The miasma and poison ahead will only grow thicker. You should stay on the outskirts, find a relatively dry highland to hide and recuperate, and wait to support us. If you encounter danger, immediately send a warning through the soul contract or retreat on your own. Kai Rong let out a low growl. Though there was reluctance in its eyes, it understood that it had become a burden. Master, be careful, this place gives me a very bad feeling. Besides the poison, there seems to be something else, lurking in the depths. After transmitting this final mental fluctuation, it dragged its heavy body and retreated with difficulty toward a low hillock that protruded from the water in the direction they had come. Only Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian remained. Follow closely. Lin Yan tucked the ancient soul scale into his lapel, close to his heart for easier sensing, and circulated his do qi. A thin protective barrier formed on his skin, infused with the warm aura of the green lotus core flame, dispersing the encroaching damp cold and some of the miasma. Xiao Yixian had no need for this. The grayish-purple poison power around her body automatically formed a barrier, absorbing and converting harmful toxins, which instead became her nourishment. The two moved one after the other, heading toward the depths of the swamp. The deeper they went, the harsher the environment became. Thick fog almost completely obscured their vision, with visibility less than 10 zhong. In the mud beneath their feet, various strange and colorful poisonous creatures began to appear, ghost-faced poison spiders, the size of a palm with human face patterns on their backs, bone-corroding arrow frogs, that were entirely emerald green and could launch themselves like arrows through the mud, 7-ring corrosive snakes, coiled on twisted dead trees, flicking their scarlet tongues. Most were merely low-level venomous insects, but they were numerous, and their toxicity was bizarre and impossible to guard against completely. Xiao Yixian became the best, cleaner. Her poison power had a natural suppression over these venomous creatures. Often, just a glance or a wisp of poison gas released was enough to make them scurry away in panic, as if they had encountered a natural predator. Occasionally, if one was foolish enough to charge at them, it would be instantly killed by a poison needle or poison powder she flicked out, and its corpse would be quickly swallowed by the swamp. Lin Yan was responsible for vigilance and dealing with emergencies. His soul perception was significantly restricted by the thick fog in the complex energy field, but it could still cover a radius of about 100 zhong. The pure corrosion soul seal's sensitivity to negative energy allowed him to detect some dangerous ores lurking deep within the mud or in the mist in advance. After traveling for about 2 hours, the resonance of the ancient soul scale reached a peak. It began to vibrate slightly, emitting a low hum. In the mist ahead, an unusual shadow vaguely appeared. Was that a ruin? Pushing aside the thick mist that had almost condensed into water droplets, the two saw a patch of broken walls and ruins soaked in dark and green muddy water. The architectural style was extremely ancient, built with a certain pitch-black giant stone, covered in bioluminescent poisonous moss and vines. On the stone walls, some twisted, non-human runic marks were vaguely visible. The style was somewhat similar to the patterns on the ancient soul scale, yet wilder and more sinister. This was clearly the destination guided by the ancient soul scale, an ancient ruins related to the ancestor of 10,000 scales, or the Hun clan. However, the environment surrounding the ruins made Lin Yan's heart sink. The ruins were situated on a relatively dry piece of black land, but surrounding the land was a ring of even darker, viscous mud that was almost like ink. On the surface of the mud, a dense, 7-colored miasma continuously rose. This 7-colored miasma was eerily beautiful, yet it emitted a terrifying toxicity that even made Xiao Yixian change her expression. And at the entrance of the ruins, in front of the half-collapsed archway, 3 strange plants were growing. They were not rooted in the soil but had grown directly from the ink-like mud. Their stems were like twisted black crystal, and at the top of each bloomed a basin-sized, sinister flower. One was blood red, with golden, lava-like veins flowing along the edges of its petals. One was ice blue, emitting a cold aura that could freeze the soul. One was purple-black like ink, and from its stamen, viscous black poison continuously dripped, making a sizzling, corrosive sound as it fell into the mud. What was even more heart-palpitating was that in the center of each flower, a blurry, sleeping, infant-like phantom was curled up. The phantom's features were unclear, yet it radiated resentment, pain, and a powerful soul fluctuation that made the soul tremble. 7 emotion soul corroding miasma. 3 poison demon infant flower. Xiao Yixian gasped, her voice carrying a rare tremor. This was a supreme poisonous object recorded in the 7-colored poison manual that existed only in legends. It is rumored that it requires extreme negative emotions, the poison of the 7 emotions, as a catalyst, combined with at least 3 top-tier, mutually generating and restricting poisons, and must be nurtured in an extremely deathly land for 1,000 years to take form. The demon infant, in the center of the flower, is an evil spirit created by the combination of toxicity and soul power. Once disturbed, it fears no physical attacks and specializes in devouring souls, and its toxicity is enough to kill a Dowang powerhouse instantly. Lin Yan's gaze was solemn. This 7-colored miasma and the 3 poison demon infant flower were clearly there to guard the entrance to the ruins. Their existence also confirmed the close connection between this place and the Hun clan, who were adept at soul power and negative energy. The ancient soul scale in his bosom vibrated even more intensely, pointing toward the depths of the collapsed archway. To enter, one must pass through this layer of deadly miasma and the guardianship of the evil flowers. Forcing one's way in was suicide. Even with Xiao Yixian's calamity poison body, facing such a legendary composite poison and soul poison evil spirit, she might not be able to escape unscathed. This miasma and the demon flowers seemed to form a natural poison formation. Xiao Yixian observed carefully for a moment, suppressing the fear in her heart, and analyzed. The 7-colored miasma is responsible for large-scale erosion and confusion, while the 3 poison demon infant flower acts as the core and the final means of slaughter. Their auras are interconnected and form a seamless whole. To move one is to affect the entire body. Unless there is a way to simultaneously suppress or break all 3, otherwise. Simultaneously suppress. Lin Yan's gaze fell upon the vibrating ancient soul scale in his bosom, and he felt the faint restlessness of the pure corrosion soul seal between his brows, as well as the appetite of the seed flame of void devouring flame within his body for that rich negative energy. A bold idea gradually took shape. Perhaps, we don't need to suppress all 3 at the same time. Lin Yan spoke slowly, his voice appearing exceptionally clear in the silent poison swamp. Since they are whole, then we will join this hole. Join. Xiao Yixian was puzzled. Yes, join. A sharp glint flashed in Lin Yan's eyes. Your calamity poison body is inherently the supreme carrier of poison in the world. My pure corrosion soul seal has a natural attraction and suppression power over soul power and negative energy. And the ancient soul scale is the key to entering this place. We will not use brute force to break it, but instead, infiltrate it as one of their own. You mean, disguising ourselves as part of this poison formation, using my poison body and your soul seal to simulate a similar aura and deceive the formation. Xiao Yixian immediately understood Lin Yan's meaning, her eyes widening slightly. This idea was too crazy, but it seemed there was a sliver of possibility. It's not entirely deception. Lin Yan shook his head. It's assimilation and guidance. Your poison power will contact, analyze, and even temporarily merge with that 7-colored miasma. We don't seek to control it, only to ensure it doesn't repel us. My soul seal will attempt to communicate with and soothe the soul power evil spirits contained within the 3 poison demon infant flower, using the same source of pure corrosion and ancient soul auras to make them view us as their own kind or superiors. And the ancient soul scale, as the true token, will provide legal passage at the critical moment. This was an extremely delicate, dangerous plan that required perfect cooperation between the two. Once it failed, they would immediately face the most violent backlash from the poison formation. Xiao Yixian took a deep breath, her emerald eyes shimmering with a firm light. I will try. My poison power has been tempered by the Xuanming true water and nourished by this place, so I have a certain ability to adapt to and analyze this kind of composite toxicity. Good, let's begin. I will first use the soul seal to attempt to communicate with the spirits of the demon flowers. You follow after, and pay attention to my rhythm. Lin Yan did not hesitate further and sat cross-legged at the edge of the miasma. He closed his eyes, and the pale flame pattern between his brows slowly lit up. A pure, ancient, and cold soul power fluctuation cautiously probed toward the 3 sinister flowers. At the same time, he took out the ancient soul scale from his bosom and held it in his left hand, allowing that ancient aura of the ancestor of 10,000 scales to also mix into the soul power fluctuation. The soul power touched the edge of the 7-colored miasma. The miasma rolled slightly, seemingly puzzled. When it touched the blood-red demon infant flower, the infant phantom in the center of the flower suddenly trembled and let out a faint, shrill scream filled with pain and resentment. A violent, scorching soul power, carrying a frenzied desire for destruction, suddenly counterattacked. Lin Yan let out a muffled groan, his soul feeling a stinging pain. But he steadied his mind and continued to release the coldness of the pure corrosion soul seal in the ancient majesty of the ancient soul scale, like a stern elder attempting to suppress the crazed, young child. Quiet, I am, the return. Lin Yan transmitted a thought mixed with the auras of the soul seal in the ancient scale. The shrill scream of the red demon infant paused, as if it were identifying him. The violent soul power attack weakened, but it was still filled with vigilance and chaotic hostility. Just at this moment, Xiao Yixian moved. She walked to Lin Yan's side, sat cross-legged, and formed a strange hand seal. The grayish-purple poison power was no longer contained but surged out like a tide. Its color began to change, simulating the luster and toxic fluctuations of the seven-colored miasma, slowly infiltrating the miasma. The essence of her poison power was extremely high, and having been assimilated by the environment here, the simulated miasma was remarkably 80–90% similar. The seven-colored miasma reacted to this, same kind, but pure poison power, rolling even more violently, but it did not launch an attack. Instead, it seemed to be tasting and communicating. Time passed bit by bit. Cold sweat seeped from Lin Yan's forehead. His soul was like walking a tightrope, as he had to both resist the erosion of the demon infant soul power and continuously release an aura of soothing and majesty. Xiao Yixian's face also grew increasingly pale. Simulating and merging into such a massive and complex miasma was a huge test of her poison power and control. The red demon infant's hostility, under the continuous suppression of the pure corrosion soul seal and the faint attraction of the ancient soul scale, began to weaken bit by bit, and its chaotic soul power gradually became calmer, even revealing a trace of confusion and dependence. The other two demon infant flowers, ice blue and purple black, also seemed to be affected. They began to sway slightly, and the phantoms in the centers of the flowers were no longer sleeping but opened their eyes, looking toward Lin Yan's direction. Now. Lin Yan suddenly opened his eyes and held the ancient soul scale high in his left hand. The dark golden patterns on the pitch black scale suddenly erupted with intense light. A clear fluctuation of authority, belonging to the owner of this place, swept out. With the scale as proof, open. The seven-colored miasma surrounding the ruins was pushed aside as if by an invisible hand, automatically parting to both sides to form a narrow passage. The three demon infant flowers simultaneously emitted a submissive, soft sound, the flowers drooped as if bowing, and the phantoms in the flower centers curled up again, falling into a deep sleep. The passage was opened. Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian exchanged a look, seeing the exhaustion and relief in each other's eyes. The two dared not delay. They immediately stood up and, along the parted miasma passage, walked quickly toward the collapsed archway. Passing through the archway, they entered the interior of the ruins. The thick fog and miasma outside were blocked off. Inside, it was instead exceptionally dry and cold. There was a smell of stale dust in the air, as well as a more intense, lingering aura of ancient soul power. The interior space of the ruins was not large, like an abandoned sacrificial hall. In the center of the hall, there was a dried-up black blood pool. On the edge of the blood pool, some broken bones were scattered. The bones were pitch black, clearly having been poisoned before death. And directly above the blood pool, suspended in the air was a scale the size of a fist, entirely deep dark purple in color, its surface covered with twisted, eerie patterns that seemed to be wriggling. The form of this scale was similar to the ancient soul scale, but its color and aura were completely different. It emitted a nauseating, sweet, fishy smell, and a terrifying toxicity that seemed capable of corroding the soul and eroding all things. Just by glancing at it, the poison power within Xiao Yixian instantly boiled and cheered, as if it had encountered its origin. This was precisely the final target of the ancient soul scale's resonance, the poison attribute origin ancient soul scale. However, just as their gazes were attracted by the poison scale and they were preparing to step forward to examine it, from the shadows at the edge of the blood pool, a hunched, gaunt figure, seemingly draped in a layer of tattered black scale skin, slowly and silently, stood up. It raised its head, revealing a face like a dried corpse, covered in tiny black scales, with two faint green ghost fires burning in its eye sockets. Its shriveled lips parted, emitting a hoarse laugh like sandpaper rubbing. He, finally, waited for the key and the vessel to deliver themselves to my door. Chapter 43, The Barrier of the Dough Practitioner, The Merit of the Profound Tear. The tempering of the green lotus core flame subflame was like the work of the most meticulous craftsman, carving away at the doji chi within Lin Yan's body time and time again. Each circulation carried away a trace of hollowness, leaving behind a portion of solidity. His 7 meridians were already full and overflowing, shimmering with a luster as gentle as jade, while the membrane between the 7th and 8th meridians had become as thin as a cicada's wing after countless impacts, appearing almost transparent. However, this final layer of membrane felt like an unbridgeable chasm. No matter how Lin Yan urged his doji, absorbed external energy, or even mobilized the life force of the living spirit flame to assist in the impact, he was always lacking the tiny bit, unable to break through completely. A bottleneck. This was a bottleneck that one would inevitably encounter when crossing from the doji chi stage to the realm of a dough practitioner. It required not only the accumulation of doji but also an insight into the essence of one's own power, a transformation where chi turned into force, permeating the entire body and condensing into one. Many people with decent talent remain stuck at this step for months or even years. Lin Yan's soul perception turned inward to inspect that stubborn membrane, his brow furrowing slightly. His accumulation was long sufficient, and his insight into power, forged through several life and death battles and the tempering of heavenly flames, was far beyond that of ordinary people. Why was he still unable to break through? System, analyze the cause of the current bottleneck. Analyzing, the host's total doji, purity, and soul strength all far exceed the standard of an ordinary peak stage 9 doji chi. Bottleneck cause determination. 1. Energy attribute conflict. The host's body contains the origins of 10 subflames of heavenly flames. Although we can initially harmonize by the system in the host's soul, their original attributes differ. When impacting the most minute meridian barrier, they generate extremely subtle energy interference and internal friction, affecting the cohesive force of the impact. 2. Coordination between soul and body. The host's soul power has surged due to the pure corrosion soul seal, but the matching of physical strength though tempered by the living spirit flame with the soul, as well as the precise control over the surging soul power, still needs adjustment. This results in a failure to perfectly unify spirit and form when impacting the critical bottleneck. 3. Lack of cultivation technique. The host currently lacks a formal cultivation technique, relying only on basic doji circulation methods. Efficiency is low, and there is a lack of deep-level guidance and transformation of the essence of doji, making it difficult to complete the qualitative change from chi to force. The system's analysis hit the nail on the head. In particular, the conflict of energy attributes and the lack of a cultivation technique were precisely Lin Yan's current weaknesses. Possessing multiple heavenly flames was both an advantage and a burden. Without a suitable cultivation technique to govern and harmonize these heavenly flame powers, relying solely on instinctive impact naturally yielded half the result with twice the effort. It seems that obtaining a profound tier cultivation technique can no longer be delayed. Lin Yan opened his eyes, a flash of realization passing through them. He had originally intended to break through to the Do practitioner realm first and then use his new cultivation level to obtain a technique more easily, but now it seemed the order might need to be adjusted. Or, use a more drastic method to forcibly break through the bottleneck. He looked into the system's inventory at the 3 fire condensing pills, obtained from the minor competition rewards, as well as the incomplete scroll of the profound tier low level Do technique, 8 extremities collapse. The fire condensing pill could purify fire attribute Do Ji and might temporarily suppress the subtle interference of other heavenly flame attributes, concentrating his power. And although 8 extremities collapse was a Do technique, its force exertion techniques involve the high-level condensation and eruption of Do Chi within the meridians. If he could comprehend it in reverse, it might provide inspiration for the qualitative change of his Do Chi. The risk was that the fire condensing pill's medicinal power was concentrated on the fire attribute, which might stimulate the other heavenly flame sub-flames to produce adverse reactions. Furthermore, forcibly comprehending cultivation concepts from a Do technique was like dancing on the tip of a knife. It was extremely easy to make a mistake and damage his meridians. There is no perfect plan. Cultivation is essentially sailing against the current. Lin Yan's eyes were firm. He took out 2 fire condensing pills and swallowed them in one gulp. The medicinal pills entered his stomach and transformed into 2 torrents of scorching, pure medicinal power, rapidly merging into his meridians. Lin Yan immediately circulated his Do Chi to guide these 2 forces, not to directly impact the bottleneck, but rather like 2 elite armies beginning to clear the field within his meridians. The auras of the green lotus core flame, the fallen heart flame, and even the trace of the void swallowing flame were stirred and strengthened by the medicinal power, while the auras of other sub-flames, such as the living spirit flame and the bone chilling flame, which were relatively gentle or contradictory in attribute, were temporarily soothed and suppressed by the medicinal power, retreating to the background. Within the entire meridian system, the activity and cohesion of the fire attribute energy instantly elevated by a notch. At the same time, Lin Yan's mind sank into the comprehension of the 8 extremities collapse scroll. No longer fixated on specific moves or force exertion, he instead experienced its core essence, force stacking layer upon layer, condensing at a single point, and erupting suddenly. He attempted to apply this state of mind to his control over his Do Chi. He imagined his entire body's Do Chi as 100 rivers returning to the sea, converging, compressing, and rotating at the end of the 7th meridian. It was no longer the scattered impact from before, but rather forming a high-speed rotating, extremely condensed Do Chi drill. At the front of the drill was the sharp edge of the purest and most scorching fire attribute Do Chi, reinforced by the medicinal power of the fire condensing pill. Now! Lin Yan shouted in his heart. His will moved the Do Chi drill, carrying all his insights into the condensation of power and the high coordination of his soul power, forcibly suppressing the cold feeling brought by the soul seal and focusing on a single point, and violently drilled toward that final layer of membrane. SS's. A sound completely different from before echoed in the depths of his soul. It was no longer a dull thud, but a sharp, frictional sound like a solid object being penetrated at high speed. That stubborn membrane, in front of this highly condensed, rotating, and attribute unified, Do Chi drill, finally began to tremble and deform violently. At the center point, minute cracks appeared, resembling the fracturing of porcelain. It worked. Lin Yan's spirit soared. Ignoring the bloating pain coming from his soul and meridians while simultaneously controlling the medicinal power, various heavenly flame auras, soul power, and the high difficulty Do Chi form, he continued to increase the drill's rotational force and penetrating power. Crack. The faint sound of shattering was clearly audible. Finally, at the moment the Do Chi drill rotated to a certain limit, a needlepoint-sized hole was completely pierced through the center of the membrane. A beam of Do Chi, condensed to the extreme and emitting a faint crimson luster, like the first ray of dawn, passed through the hole and shone into the entrance of the 8th meridian. The bottleneck was broken. In an instant, it felt as if some shackle within Lin Yan's body had been broken. The pure, long accumulated, and already liquefied Do Chi in the 7th meridian, like a flood breaching a dam, cheered and surged into the newly opened, wider, and tougher 8th meridian. Not only that, but the Do Chi in all other meridians throughout his body seemed to react in a chain reaction, beginning to circulate and grow at an unprecedented speed. In the outside world, the thin energy began to actively gather toward Lin Yan, passing through his pores, merging into his body, replenishing his consumption, and accelerating the transformation and rebirth of his Do Chi. His aura climbed steadily at a speed visible to the naked eye, quickly crossing a certain critical point. Do practitioner, a 1-star Do practitioner. A brand new, powerful sense of strength filled his entire body. It was not just a massive increase in the total amount of Do Chi and a leap in quality, but also a deeper sense of control over his own power. He could clearly feel the trajectory of the Do Chi flowing through his meridians and could more precisely control the magnitude and form of its output. The coordination between his soul and body had also significantly improved at the moment of the breakthrough. Although the cold feeling brought by the soul seal still existed, it was no longer as sluggish as before. However, just as Lin Yan was immersed in the joy of the breakthrough and preparing to consolidate his realm in one go, an unexpected change occurred. The other several heavenly flame sub-flames that he had previously temporarily suppressed with the medicinal power of the fire condensing pill, especially the living spirit flame and the bone chilling flame, began to rebound after sensing the violent energy fluctuations in Lin Yan's body caused by the breakthrough and the emptiness brought by the newly opened meridian. They were no longer quiet, each emitting energy with vastly different attributes, attempting to surge into the newly created 8th meridian and seize territory. The newly created 8th meridian, not yet fully nourished and consolidated, was extremely fragile. Several types of heavenly flame energy with different attributes, and even conflicting ones, surged in simultaneously, instantly triggering a violent energy conflict and sharp pain in his meridians. HMPH. Lin Yan groaned, his face turning pale. The exhilaration from the breakthrough vanished, replaced by the excruciating pain of his meridians feeling as if they were being cut and stirred by several small knives simultaneously. The newly formed Do Chi also became chaotic. Greed leads to indigestion. Everyone, be quiet. Lin Yan roared in his heart. His soul power erupted with full force, coordinating with the Do Chi that had just broken through and possessed stronger control, to forcibly suppress and channel these rebellious heavenly flame energies. The green lotus core flame and the fallen heart flame, acting as the main force, were also mobilized to help suppress and harmonize them. But this was only a temporary measure. Without a suitable cultivation technique to fundamentally govern and harmonize these heavenly flame powers, this conflict and internal friction would always exist, becoming the greatest hidden danger on his path of cultivation, and might even trigger catastrophic consequences in the future when impacting higher realms. A profound tier cultivation technique. I must find one as soon as possible. Lin Yan gritted his teeth. While enduring the sharp pain in his meridians, he arduously combed through the chaotic energy in his body, consolidating his realm as a 1-star Do practitioner. He knew that although he had broken through, his foundation had been left with a trace of instability due to the energy conflict. Just as he was fully focused on internal inspection and regulating his breath, outside the cave, Xiao Yixian, who was responsible for keeping watch, suddenly issued a rapid and low warning. Lin Yan, something is approaching. Many. They are very fast. Are they bats? No, it's a swarm of blood-sucking poison bats. And there's a more powerful big guy driving them. Lin Yan opened his eyes abruptly, a flash of sharp light in his pupils, as he forcibly suppressed the discomfort in his body. The commotion of the breakthrough had ultimately attracted these uninvited guests in the swamp. He rose to his full height, feeling the surging yet slightly chaotic Do practitioner Do Chi within him. He looked toward the sky outside the cave entrance, which was rapidly darkening and shrouded in the sound of countless tiny wings flapping and sharp screeching, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold arc. Perfect. I'll use you all to test the power I just broke through with, and by the way, vent some frustration. Chapter 44. Mist Poison Miasma, Grey Domain and Tide. At the edge of the mist swamp, the air was so thick it felt like it could be wrung out like water. It was vastly different from the scorching dryness of the lava cave and the cold, deathly silence of the underground dark rivers. Looking out, one saw an endless, muddy wetland interwoven with gray-green and dark brown, turbid petals dotted the landscape like the festering sores of the earth. Dense, low-lying, and strangely shaped shrubs and ferns were intertwined, forming a natural maze. But what was most unsettling was the gray-white mist that never dissipated all year round, almost condensing into a solid form. This mist was not ordinary water vapor, it was mixed with various humus, the excrement of poisonous insects, and swamp poisons that seeped from the ground and fermented slowly. It blocked the sky and sun, not only severely limiting vision. With Lin Yan's current soul perception, he could only penetrate about 100 jong, but also constantly eroding the protective Do Chi of intruders, bringing continuous numbness, dizziness, and even hallucinations. Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian stood on a relatively dry and hard high ground at the edge of the swamp, while Kai Rong crouched behind them. Its massive body and fiery attributes seemed completely out of place here, and the lava carapace on its body hissed as it was eroded by the damp and cold mist, its aura appearing somewhat withered. Clearly, this environment was extremely unfriendly. This is the place. Lin Yan opened his palm. The ancient soul scale, which had been emitting warmth and pointing northeast, reached its peak heat at this moment, the dark gold patterns on its surface glowing faintly, pointing directly at the boundless sea of gray-white mist ahead. The resonance is strongest. It must be deep within this swamp. Xiao Yixian took a deep breath of the air, which was filled with a strange, fishy sweetness and a sense of intoxication, her emerald eyes exceptionally bright. Far from feeling uncomfortable, she felt a sense of relief throughout her body. The gray-purple poison force within her, tempered by the schwamming true water, appeared exceptionally active and greedy in this dense, miasma-filled environment. It's very comfortable here. My poison force circulation speed has increased by at least 30%, and I seem to be able to vaguely perceive the veins of certain special toxins within the miasma. This confirmed Lin Yan's conjecture. The calamity poison body was like a fish in water here. But this swamp is definitely not simple. Lin Yan's gaze swept over the seemingly calm but actually treacherous petals and mudflats. In his soul perception, countless weak but aggressive life forms were lurking under the water, in the mud, and even in the mist, mostly various poisonous insects, venomous snakes, and strange magical beasts that had adapted to the miasma environment. The mist has the effect of blocking and eroding soul perception. We must be more careful. System, scan the current environment, establish a toxin database, and continuously scan for potential threats. Command confirmed. Environmental scanning in progress. Detected complex biological miasma, mixture of paralytic, hallucinogenic, corrosive, and neurotoxins. Energy level, low medium, but has a continuous weakening effect on Do Chi and soul perception. Detected a large number of low-tier poison attribute life reactions, mainly tiers 1 to 3. Detected abnormal fluctuations in earth vein energy. Source, deep in the swamp, consistent with the direction of the ancient soul scale resonance attribute. Mixed mainly poison, wood, water, and yin. Establishing environmental model and threat warning. With the system's assistance, Lin Yan felt a little more at ease. He turned to look at Kai Rong. Kai Rong, the environment here is too suppressive for you. Stay here to provide support. Find a hidden, dry place to lurk and recover from your injuries. If there's an emergency, contact me via the soul contract. Kai Rong acted as if it had been granted amnesty and nodded repeatedly. Yes, master. You must be careful. It was eager to leave this damp, cold, and stifling ghost place immediately. After settling Kai Rong, Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian exchanged a look and, without hesitation, stepped into the sea of gray-white mist. Once they entered the swamp, their vision suddenly shrank to less than 10 jong. Underfoot was soft, slippery mud that could collapse at any time, requiring them to constantly use Do Chi to lighten their bodies and rely on soul perception to probe for footholds in advance. The fishy, sweet, and intoxicating aura in the air was even more intense. Even with their cultivation, inhaling it into their lungs caused a slight sense of dizziness and numbness, requiring them to constantly circulate their Do Chi to dispel it. Xiao Yixian walked in front. Her keen perception of toxicity and her poison force's affinity for the miasma made her the best pathfinder. With gray purple poison force swirling around her fingertips, she gently pushed aside the strange vines dripping with mucus that blocked their way, while constantly adjusting the frequency of her own poison force, trying to resonate with certain, safe, toxin veins in the surrounding environment to avoid areas filled with aggressive poison sources. This was a technique she had newly comprehended from the 7-colored poison manual, Poison Sense Resonance. Lin Yan followed closely behind, his soul perception fully activated like a radar, cooperating with the system scan to remain vigilant against any movement. The pure corrosion soul seal between his brows emitted a faint cold light, easily purifying and dispelling the hallucinogenic toxins that invaded his consciousness. The seed flame of void devouring flame circulated slowly in his meridians, ready at any moment to devour any energy attacks he might encounter that could not be overcome by poison force. The first half day of the journey was relatively smooth. Apart from the harsh environment, they did not encounter any major dangers. The occasional second tier, corrosion poison crocodile, that lunged from the mudflats of the third tier, ghost-faced poison spider, that shot down from the treetops were easily dealt with by Xiao Yixian's precise poison needles or Lin Yan's swift 8 extremities collapse. For Xiao Yixian, the toxicity and materials of these magical beasts were good supplements and experimental materials. But as they went deeper, the swamp environment became increasingly bizarre. In the gray-white mist, wisps of pale purple, more solid ribbons of miasma began to appear. The mud on the ground gradually decreased, replaced by a strange dark red soil that resembled clotted blood, which had a strange elasticity when stepped on. The surrounding plants also became increasingly ferocious, some even growing structures resembling sharp teeth that opened and closed slightly. Ahead, the energy fluctuations are very chaotic, and the resonance of the ancient soul scale seems to have been interfered with by something. It's intermittent. Xiao Yixian stopped, her brows slightly furrowed. The ancient soul scale in her hand flickered with light, and its direction became blurred. Lin Yan also felt it. The mist ahead was deeper in color, almost turning gray-purple. When his soul perception probed into it, it was like a clay ox entering the sea, and the information fed back was extremely chaotic and complex. The system also sent a warning. High-intensity complex energy field detected in the area ahead, suspected to be a natural poison maze or some kind of large-scale poison array, causing severe interference with perception and direction. Exploration with caution is advised. A poison array. Lin Yan's heart stirred. Could it be that the depths of this swamp were not naturally formed, but were man-made or naturally formed into some kind of field suitable for poison attributes? Was this related to the direction of the ancient soul scale? Stay close to me and slow down, Lin Yan said in a deep voice. He was the first to step into the great purple dense fog. Upon entering, the surrounding scene immediately became grotesque and bizarre. The mist seemed to have life, constantly twisting and changing to form various ferocious and strange illusions, skeletons of rotting giant beasts, rivers flowing with venom, countless wailing and struggling souls. These illusions were not purely spiritual attacks, they were mixed with real, poisonous energy that could erode the soul and body. The pure corrosion soul seal was automatically activated, and the cold soul power fluctuation was like a clear spring, purifying and dispelling the illusions and soul poisons that invaded his consciousness one by one. But they had to deal with the physical miasma attacks themselves. Xiao Yixian fully operated the poison manual, and the great purple poison force surged out like a tide, forming a relatively stable, poison domain, around her and Lin Yan, which eroded, offset, and even, assimilated with the invading miasma. She was like the most agile dancer, walking on the tip of a poisonous blade, constantly adjusting the attributes and frequency of her poison force, striving to open up a relatively safe passage in this chaotic energy field. Lin Yan incorporated the auras of the green lotus core flame and the fallen heart flame into his doji, forming a scorching inner protective shield to resist the corrosive energy that could not be completely neutralized by the poison force. At the same time, he tried to use his soul power to comb the chaotic energy veins around him to find a pattern. Just as the two were struggling to trek through this poison maze, a sudden change occurred. Rustle, 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 rustle. A sound so dense it made one's scalp tingle, like the friction of billions of fine grains of sand, came from all directions. It did not come from the mist, but from under their feet, from that strange dark red soil. Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian looked down at the same time, their expressions changing drastically. They saw that the dark red soil was rolling like boiling water. Countless ants, the size of thumbs, with gray-black bodies, shiny carapaces, and ferocious mouthparts, surged out from the soil like a black tide. Their numbers were countless. In an instant, they covered the ground for hundreds of zhong in all directions, and as if under unified command, they piled up layer upon layer and surged toward the location of Lin Yan and Xiao Yixian. Grey Domain Army Ants, and they are mutated poisonous ants, Xiao Yixian exclaimed. She recognized this terrifying creature. Grey Domain Army Ants were already famous for their massive numbers, fearlessness in the face of death, and devouring everything. But these in front of them had darker carapace colors, and the saliva dripping from their mouthparts emitted a pungent fishy stench. Clearly, they had mutated from long-term survival in this miasma swamp, and their toxicity was even more potent. A single Grey Domain poisonous ant might only be equivalent to a first or second tier magical beast, but an ant-tide formed by such a terrifying number, let alone them, even a Dowang expert caught in it, if they could not escape in time, would likely be exhausted to death and not until not even bones remained. We can't fight them head-on. Go. Lin Yan made a decisive decision, grabbed Xiao Yixian, and fully activated his explosive step, trying to rush out from the gaps where the ant-tide had not yet fully encircled them. However, the speed and reaction of the ant-tide were far beyond their imagination. The seemingly chaotic ant colony actually had extremely tight organization and collaboration. As soon as Lin Yan moved, the ant-tide in front immediately changed formation, piling up layer by layer to form black ant walls, several feet high, blocking their path. At the same time, the great purple miasma in the sky seemed to be drawn by the aura of the ant colony, becoming thicker and carrying strong viscosity, greatly slowing their speed. Chi, chi, chi. Countless poisonous ants rushed up fearlessly, hitting the protective dochi or poison domain of the two. They were shattered by dochi or corroded by poison force, making toothaking sounds as they turned into foul-smelling black water. But more poisonous ants rushed forward one after another, like black waves, constantly impacting and consuming their defenses. What was even more terrifying was that the black water flowing out after these poisonous ants died had extremely strong corrosiveness and toxicity, which not only eroded their dochi but also polluted Xiao Yixian's poison domain, causing her poison force consumption to increase sharply. This won't work. We'll be exhausted to death here. Xiao Yixian's face turned pale. She could feel the rapid loss of her poison force. The number of these poisonous ants was simply too large, an endless stream. Lin Yan's eyes were cold as he scanned the ant colony like a tide. In his soul perception, he vaguely captured that in a relatively stable area behind the ant tide, there were several soul fluctuations that were far stronger than ordinary poisonous ants and closely connected to each other. It was the queen ant or the command node. Capture the ringleader first. Find the commander. Lin Yan shouted in a low voice, and the pure corrosion soul seal between his brows shone brightly. A pure and cold soul power impact, like an invisible blade, forcibly pierced through the chaotic miasma and the mental interference field of the ant colony, sweeping toward those several strong soul fluctuations. Soul thought impact. Shock. Those soul fluctuations clearly trembled violently, and the offensive of the ant tide also appeared in a moment of chaos and lag. Now is the time. Lin Yan seized this fleeting opportunity, and the doji in his body fused with the seed flame of void devouring flame again. Void flame domain, open. A ring of pitch black flames, as if capable of devouring light, suddenly spread out with Lin Yan as the center. Wherever it passed, the poisonous ants that rushed up were like being thrown into a void abyss, disappearing instantly, leaving not even ashes behind. Even the thick miasma and corrosive black water were quickly devoured and purified by this black flame. This move consumed a lot of energy, but the effect was immediate. The black flame ring burned a vacuum channel several zhong wide in the ant tide, pointing directly at the location of the soul fluctuations. Follow me closely, Lin Yan shouted in a low voice, took Xiao Yixian, and rushed deep into the ant tide along this short channel opened by the void devouring flame. The ant tide was clearly angered, or rather, its predatory instinct was triggered by this sudden power that could devour them, and it surged from both sides in the rear even more frantically, trying to re-encircle them. But Lin Yan ignored it, only maintaining the void flame domain in front, like a black drill, constantly going deeper. Finally, after rushing through hundreds of zhong, they arrived at the core area of the ant tide. The poisonous ants here were significantly larger, their carapaces were dark purple, and their auras were stronger. In the center of their heavy protection was a relatively dry nest platform built from some kind of white bone and mucus. On the platform, 3 giant poisonous ants the size of calves were coiled. They were dark golden color, their compound eyes were scarlet, and their mouthparts were like 2 sharp scimitars, emitting a powerful aura equivalent to 4th-tier magical beasts, and their spiritual connection was tight, clearly the command core of this huge ant tide. 3 general ants. And in the depths of the nest behind the 3 general ants, one could vaguely see a larger, slowly wriggling dark golden figure, and something that was out of place with the surrounding environment, emitting a faint emerald light. The aura of that emerald light actually produced a faint resonance with the ancient soul scale in Xiao Yixian's hand. Lin Yan's eyes were like electricity, locking onto that point of emerald light in the dark golden figure. It seemed that this terrifying ant tide was not an accident. What they were guarding was likely the core of this swamp poison array, and it might also be the entrance to the ancient soul scale ruins related to the poison attribute that they were looking for.